But yeah, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. So this is the debate slash discussion on the topic of whether Donald Trump and Elon Musk are socialists. And I think this is a pretty important topic because you don't want socialists running your country. I extended an invitation a few days ago saying, hey, does anyone want to debate me on this? Because I believe they're both socialists. I believe there are a lot of evidences for that. And, mostly crickets until Drew came along. And Drew, do you want to give yourself a little introduction here?
Yeah, my name is Drew Chamberlain. I live in Layton, Utah. I'm a party hack. I've been involved in the Republican Party for about 30 years. I first got involved in politics when I was 11 years old in Virginia, knocking doors for a guy named Warren, I think, House of Representatives. He's now a senator, I believe, so he's been there that long. Not a very good senator, I'll say. But yeah, happy to be on. I do not think President Trump is a socialist. So I'm looking for some evidence and want to have a good discussion.
Sounds great. Yeah, and thanks, Drew, for coming on here. Yeah, we know each other from Utah, the Utah Republican Party caucus and convention system. We're both delegates there, and we both love the caucus system. We love real grassroots representation. We were just chatting a moment ago about how under the Constitution originally you could vote, the electors in the Electoral College could vote for more than one candidate. You could vote for two, which meant that you could avoid the two-party system of false dichotomies. And so my conjecture here is that we would not even have to be having this conversation right now about the lesser of two evils if we were if we had a wiser system, if we'd actually kept the constitutional method in place instead of trammeling it through this wretched two-party system that misrepresents the people.
That's right.
So, all right. Well, without further ado, I guess let's go ahead and get into the discussion. Thanks for being brave. I know it's a lot easier. Let me just give a little bit of context from like what I've been experiencing, because like I'll post things. I'm saying, oh, Elon Musk did this, said that. Donald Trump said this, did that, and people will say, oh, you've got TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, or Elon derangement syndrome, or whatever, and they just won't even engage the points most of the time. So I'm like, okay, let's actually have some real dialogue, some real back and forth on this, because that's what needs to happen instead of just the, oh, you're crazy. I mean, it's people who don't even know me who are calling me crazy typically. So, and to be fair, there are people who've known me for a while and then say, you're off your rocker. And it's like, well, it's because we haven't had a conversation, a face-to-face conversation about this, I guess. And maybe one of us will win you over, right? Whoever's watching this, I know that there's some people who have some axes to grind on this point. So, but I think it's pretty important to find out. So, all right. Well, I guess I've got the firing cannons here, right? So is this?
That's right. That's right.
I guess I'll raise my concerns, my evidences here, and then maybe Drew will try to come up with a rebuttal, or just we'll discuss and dissect it and so on. And so yeah, one of the first indications, like I was very concerned in the 2016 presidential race. I did not want Hillary Clinton for president. I fell asleep like in front of my computer, stayed up late watching the things come in, watching the votes come in, and I was just like, America's doomed. America's doomed if we have Hillary. And then I woke up in the morning and Donald Trump was our president. And I was like, yay, maybe I could go start a business or something because we're not dead yet, right? That was my feeling back then. But then, like, during the pandemic, for example, he participated in issuing these COVID stimulus checks, and I'm like, oh, that's not great. So that was one of the first. Well, I won't say one of the first, but that was kind of a decisive moment for me, because I was like, no, you don't write checks from your government to your people. You just don't do that. You pay your government employees a fair salary or wage or whatever, but you don't just go cut checks for the American people. And so that was one of the first things where I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, he's literally issuing these stimulus checks or economic recovery checks and stuff. Um, so I don't know. What do you think? Is that should we have a little thumbs up, thumbs down? Is that socialism or is that not socialism?
Well, it's something that's been done many times in the past. I don't like it. Of course, I want a very small, limited government, and that is not a small, limited government. Um, we don't. We certainly didn't like what President Trump did in 2020 when he shut the government, shut things down, and had Fauci running things. And we have this rather long um, learning curve that we have to suffer through with President Trump. He still doesn't understand the proper role of government, doesn't understand the Constitution in a lot of different ways. He does, this time around, he has a lot better people working for him, I think, that he's picked. That's helping a lot. Some of those people do understand proper role, but I still don't think he does. Um, I kind of feel like sometimes he's pretending, pretending to be a Christian, those kind of things. And I hope he's becoming a Christian or that he is a Christian. I would like that. It's not really necessary, maybe, but it's certainly something that we want in all of our elected officials to be moral, Christian. But I just think this time around he's come quite a ways on his learning curve, and he's doing much better. I don't think he'll make the same kind of mistakes he made in his first term. Although in his first term he did very, very well. He dealt with COVID swiftly, I think. Made some mistakes, obviously, but tried to get that out of the way. And then towards the end of his term, the economy was really going gangbusters. If you remember, the gas was down to $1.80 a gallon. I like that. That's a tax decrease, I guess, in a lot of ways. If you deregulate, those are things that can lower our cost of living. So that's what I'm excited about, and I really want him to do well this term. I want to have that.
Yeah, so it sounds like there are definitely things that a president can do that could lower have an impact for us, lower the cost of living and so on, lower the price of groceries.
Yeah,
I know there's a thing about eggs and stuff, right? And
yeah, and
there are apologists for either side.
writing stimulus checks was something he should not have done. No leader should do that. Take money from the Treasury or actually borrowing it,
Yeah.
add it to our debt to write a stimulus check. So that was a mistake, but I don't think that makes him a socialist.
Okay. All right. We'll see how many. Do you think let me just put it this way, just so we're clear. Do you think it weighs? Do you think it's evidence that he is a socialist? It could weigh something in that balance, right? Is that a yea or nay?
It pushes him that direction.
Okay. All right. So taking it from a binary decision to a continuous valued function, we'd say, all right, there's at least these one or a couple grains of rice in the scale that say, okay, he did the stimulus checks thing. Your hope is that he's learned to do better than that, but we both share this concern that he's really not very constitutionally literate or committed to the Constitution, perhaps, and we've seen evidences of that. And but yeah, so like if you were to go and
understand it, maybe he can't understand it. Maybe he comes from a background where he just it's not possible.
it just doesn't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's I could say more on that with the executive orders that the suite of those that he's rolled out, certainly. But yeah, so, but yeah, would you be very concerned if you were to like issue a second round of checks? I know this is a hypothetical, so this doesn't weigh anything, but just like saying,
he's talked about it, hasn't he? Yeah, I would be concerned. Although, if he deregulates, I think that brings him back to the center in a lot of ways, so he can do things that'll bring him back to center.
Okay. So I guess maybe the method for judging here is to say maybe he could do things that are socialistic, and it tips him towards that side. And then if he deregulates something else, we'll give him some brownie points. And
He can come
it's
back,
just
right?
right. Okay. All right. So that's the hope, right? At least, well, we'd hope for zero. That's the ideal. Zero of toxic socialist policies, etc. Let's go ahead and shift a little bit. So actually, there was he actually just posted on his Truth Social. What was it? Yeah, just today, this morning, talking about. Here, I'm going to go ahead and I don't know if you came prepared with slides or anything like that, but I've got a little couple of visuals here just for the sake of just
Make it interesting.
stuffing our faces with some socialistic gritty goodness. That's a contradiction in terms. All right, here we go. But yeah, right here. Share this screen. Screen sharing in Zoom is kind of weird. All right, so yeah, so Donald Trump saying our farmers are great, but because of their greatness, they're always put on the front line with our adversaries, such as China. Sorry, it's a rambling tweet here. Whenever there's trade and negotiation, in this case, a trade war, the same thing happened in my first term. China was brutal to our farmers. I guess I told these patriots just to hold on, and a great trade deal was made. I rewarded our farmers with a payment of $28 billion all through the China deal, yada, yada. So I'm just like, okay, so he's clearly still bragging about his subsidies to the farmers on account of, these adverse trade effects previously that had some origin in his previous tariff policies, right? And that impacted the farmers. And he's like, okay, we'll just band-aid that with these subsidies, right? So I don't know about you. I would take that as evidence that he has definitely not learned the lesson here, because he's still parroting the same. It's very clear that he's still operating within the same paradigm. That basically he causes some economic damage to people, some attrition, some fallout, and then he just smooths it over with some subsidies, right? And that's his MO here, right? He's saying that's the patriotic thing to do, kind of thing, right? So anyway, that's another red flag for me.
Yeah, well, he's subsidizing industry, industries that are in trouble, and if that makes him a socialist, then every president before him is a socialist too.
Oh yeah, and so and just to be super clear, yeah, let me just get this out of the way right now, because this is exactly how I feel about this. Is I feel like tell me if you feel otherwise, if you think this is not the case at any point during our conversation today. But I feel like practically the only counter argument that people can make, I guess there are two primary flavors to Trump being a socialist, is number one, well, every other president before him did it, right? Or that's normal, right? We've just become accustomed to that flavor of socialism, and therefore we don't sweat it too much. Or number two is what you just said previously of, well, maybe if he deregulates some things, then maybe that tips the scale more in favor of him not being a socialist, right? So maybe let's see if there are other arguments because I want to kind of have a digest for us at the end of this, so I can put it maybe in the description or something like that, and just say, okay, here is this kind of a summary, maybe of what we discussed. But anyways, let me know if at any point you disagree with that. Those are kind of the two primary.
Fair. That's fair, and I don't like to use those comments where another state does it, so it's okay. He could have maybe deregulated a little bit, maybe made it a little bit easier for the farmers that way, instead of writing them checks or subsidizing. I don't know how he gave them the money, but did he just write them a check? Did he buy grain at a higher price from them?
I'm sure I don't know all the mechanisms. I mean, the way he self-styled it is he paid them basically as it were a paycheck.
He helped them with someone else's money.
Right. Yeah. So you look at the net effect of that, though. It's okay, the average American consumer, it's okay, we're paying more money now for our agricultural products due to these tariffs with China. And then Trump's like, oh, well, let me go ahead and take more money from you, the taxpayer, and just give it to these farmers and pretend that the problem goes away. I am going to say that even if the intent is to, or even if the claim is claim and intent, I guess, is to say, well, I'm just evening things out. I'm just smoothing it out. I'm just no harm was done because I just took this patch from here and I just put it over there, and it's still your money, guys. Don't worry. Like, one, that is still like that's still textbook socialism, if you will. Maybe not textbook, because the textbooks are often dishonest about socialism. So I've got to be careful there. Maybe we should, just define socialism. I'm sure we're going to get into some of the weeds there, but that is a classic case of socialism. That's the defining characteristic of it, I suppose, is redistribution of means, right? And so it's not even necessarily, you don't even have to claim that, oh, some of it was taken as, graft or anything like that. You don't.
Well, it's like a couple of years ago, we had the film industry wanted to come in here, so we gave them a whole bunch of subsidy so they would make movies in southern Utah. Well, we don't want to do that. That's not the proper role of government.
Yeah.
Pick winners and losers.
Yeah, so the picking winners and losers, and maybe this is another concise way to represent socialism, is it's effectively it's violations of the takings clause. Taking people's private property for public use without just compensation. Maybe doesn't even cover all the cases, because you can take private property for private use if you're just taking it from one person and giving it to another, right? That's still, it could be in the name of the public, but it's still like a private to private transaction with the government as the broker. So it's like you have these gaddy robbers, and they could literally just be stealing from one person and just giving it to the other. Just basically, that's functionally what socialism and communism are.
It's bad government, and certainly we do it here in Utah.
Yeah, and I'm not going to claim that it's an impossible standard to meet. And you're right, the states are doing this too. This is, I think,
no, we can meet it. The legislature in grassroots.org, we track those bills all the time. Those are kind of our favorite bills when they're taken from one group and giving it to another, picking winners and losers.
Well, and we should definitely
we ding them for that.
Good. Good. Well, and yeah, so that's kind of the point here, is just to say, like, I don't know, dispel the illusion that I don't know that many people really are under the notion that Trump is some squeaky clean kind of a guy. I think honestly the MAGA stereotype today, and pardon if I'm mischaracterizing anybody, but like, if you disagree with this characterization, please like refute it. But there's this kind of feel about Donald Trump of, we know he's a not squeaky clean guy. We know he's rough around the edges. We know he's a bully. We know he's a jerk. We know he's like, and I'm not trying to just like pour down an invective on anybody. It's just they say, oh yeah, we wanted the bull in the china shop, and I'm like, okay, but does that mean we just turn a blind eye to his socialism? And so, like, as a binary claim, which we often try to reduce it to, that is Trump a socialist or is he not? Like, I say let's weigh the evidences. So like, yeah, let's keep that scorecard like you're doing with our state legislators and other public officials. I did want to talk about one other thing here. So we have the CARES Act, like the pandemic stimulus checks, the insurance, the loans, the subsidies, massive payouts. I think $2.2 trillion total. They got earmarked under that. Some of that was under Biden, but I think the majority of it was under Trump. So that's one thing. He's still touting that. He's still claiming victory points for that, and basically making that the basis of his policy even to this day, right? So the second, I guess, major lump category that comes to my mind that was introduced, he was talking about it during his campaign for the presidency, is like a sovereign wealth fund. And so he has this executive order ostensibly creating a sovereign wealth fund. And my issue with this, I'm going to go ahead and just like pull up a page for this one too, because it helps to actually look at it. Here we go. So yeah, my issue with this one, so this is presidential actions, this is from whitehouse.gov. A plan for establishing a United States sovereign wealth fund, yada yada, he says, by the authority, see to the international leadership of the United States. Establish a sovereign wealth fund to promote fiscal sustainability, lessen the burden of taxes, yada yada. Anyways, it's claiming, yeah, let's create this sovereign wealth fund. But what is a sovereign wealth fund? It's a government-managed fund. Like, you have some agency, some bureau, some bureaucracy, basically, that is managing this fund. And one of the key points that behind a so-called sovereign wealth fund is that they invest it, right? Let's see. I think funding mechanisms and investment strategies, right? So like I've got at least two major like constitutional red flags raised on this. Number one is so the power of the purse is the exclusive purview of Congress. You don't have an executive branch or agency or bureaucracy that has any spending power whatsoever. Everything has to be by an express appropriation through Congress. That's Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7, I think, in the Constitution. But the second point here is, regardless of who's doing it, which branch of government, which agency, whatever, investment strategies. So I have scoured the Constitution on this issue too, and I see absolutely nothing that authorizes investment decisions by any government body. And so, what do you make of that? What's your response to the sovereign wealth fund idea here?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, the spending comes through the House of Representatives, and that's the only place. Kind of brings up a point. Right now, we're saving money in the government, money that's been allocated to be spent. I guess maybe what do we do with that money? Do we give that back to the House of Representatives? Say that we don't need that much. Say they've allocated $100 billion to USAID. You closed USAID, $100 billion. Does it go back to the House of Representatives? Does it go into a slush fund? Do we just use that to pay government kind of in the meantime, and then we maybe don't need another spending bill coming through the House of Representatives because they've already got this $100 billion in a pot somewhere? I don't know. Maybe he's thinking about using that money and just relabeling it to this other new thing. I don't know what his thinking is there. He obviously can't tax for that fund without a bill through the House. So if he's building this fund, where's that money coming from? Do you know?
It's not defined here. He's saying that the Secretary of the Treasury and the Secretary of Commerce shall jointly submit a plan to the President, and including recommendations for funding mechanisms and so on. So we should expect to see, and so this was issued on February 3rd. I don't know if such a plan has been issued yet. We're still within the 90-day window for that. Will be until
probably has people working on it, and they said, well, where are you going to get the money? You can't tax.
Yeah, that could well be the case. There was
money.
There is this wasn't one of my primary talking points here, but he did have the Bitcoin strategic reserve idea, and that, as I understood it, was going to be based off of civil asset forfeiture of basically confiscated Bitcoin, confiscated cryptocurrencies, and just basically pocket those as a government and just, I don't know, jingle them around, allocate them how they see fit, redistribute, invest, whatever, use them as a piggy bank for whatever they decide to use them for.
But if the FBI seizes a drug lord's money, the president doesn't get to spend that. I don't know where it goes.
That's a great point. We should probably cross-reference this one to his executive order on the Bitcoin strategic reserve. I remember going through it and seeing apart from the fact that there's some let's go ahead and go into that actually, because I don't want to.
I guess
perjure myself here.
Goes back into the Treasury. That's why he's asking the Treasury to come up with a plan. He doesn't have the.
The thing is, like we read in there, he's saying Secretary Treasurer and Secretary of Commerce are going to come up with a plan for funding mechanisms, and I'm like, okay, that's appropriations. That's a congressional function. Like, they have no purview of that. Investment strategies, neither Congress nor the executive branch, or the judiciary for that matter, none of them have any authority to do that. So,
right.
That's an issue I have there. And
although they do invest, like we said before, they give subsidies.
Right, they do, and it's interesting to think of it that way because that's honestly not the native way I've thought about subsidies before. But frankly, this is just another way to subsidize businesses through loans. Like, if you're you're an investor in something, it actually comes with a lot of strings attached that we should
Sure.
unpack, I think. But among them being like, yeah, you could make the federal government can now make a loan to some business and decide, basically choose. They can choose winners and losers in any industry they want. They've anyway just by deciding, hey, we're going to give you a $50 billion loan or something like that. We're going to give you, $400 million loan, and
Very common. We bailed out the auto industry. I don't know how many times. We want them to build the electric cars, so we give Ford, $10 billion to build electric cars. I don't like it.
yeah, yeah. So
Because I don't want to give Ford my money to build electric cars, but the government takes it from me.
I don't either. I don't. But then the other thing too, that there's another side of this as well, and that is the government entities themselves become stakeholders in these supposedly private enterprises. Because if they're buying shares, if they're buying stock, they're actually monkeying with the stock prices and so on, and they will have a stake in the board of directors or something. Who knows what? I don't. I'll be honest. I haven't unpacked that too much. I haven't peeled away that much of the floorboards here to see just how deep the rat infestation goes and how much or how they do that. But in theory, technically, if they're investing, then yeah, they'd be shareholders at a minimum. They could be stakeholders. They could have a possibly controlling or very influential stake in these supposedly private businesses. And we also just know that it's a rule of nature that the government does not fund anything that it does not intend to control. If government's sending you money, they basically own you, is the way that they think about it.
Yeah, and in Utah, we built, like down at Silicon Slopes, we built the infrastructure. Yeah, so we built the infrastructure for Silicon Slopes so they could expand that. It seemed to work pretty well, but I'm sure a lot of businesses down there. Well, we couldn't have done it in the first place. I think they would have built it there anyway. I don't know.
Well, it's really interesting. So actually, you and I have seen this, Drew, with the what was it, SB 337, the Land Use and Development Act that created or fortified the Beehive Development Agency here in the state of Utah. Thankfully, that didn't pass this last legislative session, but there were a lot of elements of it that did in other bills, and that they've been really trying to get pushed through there. And one of those features, the suite of features that they're pushing, and as far as I can tell, all the states are doing this right now, practically. They're creating these basically autonomous police agencies, like self-policing, non-governmental agencies, as it were, that have power to raise revenues. So they have tax powers, they can confiscate things, but there's no representation. So it's from the people there. There's no accountability link between this agency and the people. And so they can go and tax, they can invest, they can issue loans. That was one of the things that I saw tons and tons of volumes of text in the Utah bills this last legislative session on. It's just like, oh yeah, we get to decide what to invest in. And we're using our magical unlimited police powers to do so. The federal government so graciously granted us through NFIB versus Sebelius and these other bogus the Supreme Court case rulings that leveraged a false definition of federalism. And this is one of the other hugely poisonous pills that I'm seeing. There's actually a very tight collaboration between the Trump administration and like the governor and the legislature in our state, because there was a spate of these bills in our state, joint resolutions, among other things, that leveraged this false definition of federalism. They're like, yeah, under the 10th Amendment, we want to end federal overreach and give power back to the states. But what that really meant, and what you could read, what you could see there in the bills they were doing, was they would quote like the 10th Amendment where it says, reserved to the states, and they would leave off, or to the people. Right? And they would claim that because of these Supreme Court precedents, claiming that states have these practically unlimited, or indefinite is the word that occurs in the Federalist Papers, with regards to the state powers. All that means is that the federal constitution doesn't define what the state's powers are. That's a given, because the people of the states define what powers they're going to confer on their state government. But anyways, they would use that as kind of it's not a loophole, but it's just an omission to see if the people will notice. that we took you out of the 10th Amendment, and we used that to arrogate to ourselves all these powers that the federal government had traditionally usurped, and now the federal government's sharing those with the states. And so, like, all these huge socialistic programs have metastasized to the states in the name of states' rights, when in fact there's no representation and no accountability. So, anyways,
Yeah,
that's
I don't think those are socialist programs. So I would argue those are not socialist, but they're just really poor government.
well, okay. Let me back it up to this. So they have these mechanisms for taxation without representation, right? And they're also redistributive agencies, right? That's their function. They get to decide. They pick these winners and losers in deciding who they're going to issue loans to and stuff, and who they're going to prioritize with this regulatory stuff. The Land Use Developments Act had this thing where they could just define an economic development zone, economic opportunity zone, and basically create their own rules for it, including potentially seizing private property and just saying, we're going to turn this into a blah, 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 because we want to, right? So kind of similar to the Silicon Slopes thing, where in the Constitution, like the federal Constitution at least, it says the government can make post offices and roads and like have military bases and stuff, and that's about it, right? There's not a whole lot that goes under the heading of infrastructure. There are a handful of infrastructure things that are properly government functions because they're enumerated powers, they're delegated. But what I've seen the state do is just seize, in addition to the federal government, just seize tons of extra things under that heading and be like, and now that means we get to control energy resources. They literally had that in one of these fake federalism bills this last session. They said, we get to control energy policy, and we get to control this and that and water and everything. Like, we get to control all your resources just because we said so, and the federal government agrees with us. Anyways, so I don't know. I guess I would say I'm not seeing how it's not socialism. If you have something that, I mean, either of these things could easily, trigger my socialism detector, right? Is to say, one, there's taxation without representation happening, and two, there's redistribution happening.
Yeah, it's redistribution.
And I mean, do you disagree that redistribution basically is socialism?
It's the beginnings of socialism.
It's the beginnings. What are the endings? Can you draw a line, say this is where it starts, this is where it ends?
Socialism is when you go to a job and they take all of your pay and then they give you back what you need to live on. That's pure socialism, isn't it?
In theory, depending on whom you ask, maybe.
Yeah.
There was an interesting thing by, I think it was thoughtco.com or something, that had basically a little two column thingy, basically saying, under socialism, the theory is that you have private ownership of the means of production, but the product gets redistributed, and then in the communism, it's the other way around kind of thing. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm not buying that. Those are both exactly the same. They're the same picture. That meme goes around. They're the same picture, because the government.
There's all kinds of gray area in there. Government funded Medicare.
Yeah, Medicare is
It's a big step towards that socialism or communism.
Yeah, Medicare is a socialistic program for sure.
Yeah.
It's not pursuant to any enumerated power. I'm trying to flesh out what is my mechanism here as well for deciding when is something socialistic versus not, because there is a pretty clear dividing line where you could say, oh, this is actually free market property rights.
Yeah, Social Security. They take your money all your working life and then give you back most of it.
Have you read The Red Carpet by Ezra Taft Benson?
No.
Oh, I love that book because he's like, this is, socialism is, so he refers to that as the red carpet. Creeping socialism is the royal road to communism. And I
agree.
I've kind of rephrased that as to say that socialism is juvenile communism. And I'll just go ahead and launch into this a little bit more just for explanation's sake. Just to say that you have any program that has to do with redistribution, welfare, etc., exceeding enumerated powers and so on, and then you get to a point, and the public is always sold on the idea that it's necessary for their well-being, right? I can give several examples, and we'll come back to Trump here in just a moment. But like, there is I want to say, very, it's not a rich history, a very grotesque history with socialism here in this country. Like we have automobile insurance mandates. Those, most Republicans I talk to will insist that those are necessary or good or healthy because, well, you want to be safe, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's what they told you in school. And as a conservative, you conserve the stuff that was pumped into your head during your public school, your government school upbringing, right? The stuff you saw in the news and the media back in those days, and on television and your movies. That's what you think America is, I guess. And that's an overgeneralization, but that's the essence of conservatism, is to conserve something, right? But we can only conserve what we're familiar with, right? And so whatever is normal to us, that's what we tend to think of as, oh, that's the Constitution, right? But no, in reality, it's not. It's like 200 plus years removed from the actual Constitution. It's been steadily weakened over time. So just to kind of put this idea in a nutshell here, the automobile insurance mandates that were pushed on the states using strings from the federal government, that was the primary argument for installing health insurance, right? And so if we didn't buy the false idea that you in advance, just in case you hurt someone, it's like, I could have a shopping cart accident. I could, anything that could go wrong now. And then we got into climate indulgences and subsidies and insurance requirements and stuff, and the ESGs on our houses and stuff. Anyways, so there are a million different manifestations of socialism. And I love what the prophets have said, that, the adversary efforts are intensifying both in magnitude, they're growing exponentially, and in variety. And so we can't just content ourselves and say, oh, well, only this can be socialism. Only this, it's like, no, there are like zillions of different camouflage species of socialism, as it were.
Yeah, and only a few prophets have really understood that.
I think they all have. I think.
Believe.
If I could just say this.
I see them going, one will be liberal, one will be conservative. It's just kind of like a ping pong ball.
I don't see that at all.
Church.
No, I don't see it that way. Here's how I see it: is the prophets speak out against socialism and communism, and they do expect, like, a warning raised once, a warning that they've repeated before in the past. Like Elder Bednar was clear, they don't need to keep on reminding us of the same things they've told us before.
Oh, but
they do oftentimes, right?
I want to see it. I want to see it every conference.
But here's part of the divide: we are the ones being tested right now because we know these things. We know that we should be going through past conference talks, and we should be using our heads. And if we actually follow the messages of the living prophet, then yes, we will discover we have all these responsibilities. We can't not discover that if we actually follow the words of the prophets to their logical and spiritual conclusions, as guided by conscience and the Holy Ghost. We will be led to those things. And here's part of the reason. I'm not going to phrase it as separation of church and state exactly, because I think that's become a very corrupted concept in the way it's been taught oftentimes. Right. But Revelation chapter 12 depicts the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as the woman that is fleeing into the wilderness. And the dragon, the devil, with all of its heads, its 10 heads or something like that, is like spewing out water to try to drown the woman and to try to swallow up the woman and her child. And in the Joseph Smith translation, it states that the kingdom of God on the earth, Joseph Smith expounds this and says that the kingdom of God on the earth is the child of the Church of Jesus Christ. So, but it is not the same as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Yeah. People who try to distort that and say, well, the kingdom of God on the earth is independent of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that's not really true, because this is the child of the church. And for those reasons and many other reasons that the prophets have already explained to us and that we can go through and find and read, we're the ones under test right now. The prophets are passing their tests by going and issuing the warning voice. It's up to us to go and issue the warning voice with the things we're seeing and actually, step forward and save the Constitution, because the church will not do it. That is not the church's mission. It's the child of the church that will do that and that will become that. And so this is, anyways,
I maybe look at that book.
Yeah, I don't want to try to set myself up like I'm some, oh, look at me, I'm some super ecclesiastical leader or something like that. I'm just a member of the church. I do hold priesthood, and I need to live up to my responsibility under that priesthood, and I can't let our Constitution perish. That is my responsibility. That is my prerogative. And so this is one of the reasons why I'm like, yeah, let's go ahead and do the frog in the pot test, right? Let's actually take a thermometer, see what the temperature of the water is right now, and most of us are like, yeah, that's pretty normal, right? Let's compare that to the temperature in 1789.
Well, I really like it. I go up here to Faith Baptist Church in Layton. I'm LDS, but I go and they do a lot of things with Davis County conservatives. They've allowed us to use their building. And the pastor up there preaches the Constitution, proper role of government. I love it. I love it. um, I wish I could see more of that in sacrament meeting.
I think we should,
We
you know,
don't.
we should talk up the freedoms that we ought to defend. I think
We do. It's a beautiful thing. It's so wonderful to live in this country where we have these freedoms, and we had the founding fathers, and they weren't perfect men, but they were good men, and they gave us this free agency, this experiment called America, which is pretty young right now, still in its infancy, but we should talk about that and talk about how wonderful that is, and that is a Christian thing. It's something Christ taught. So we could do more of it. Maybe next
yeah,
time they ask me to speak, which is never. But maybe I can give that talk.
that's fair. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and since I did find this strategic Bitcoin reserve thing here,
Okay.
uh, this I guess we'll come back here and just say yeah, this order creates a strategic Bitcoin reserve that will treat Bitcoin as a reserve asset, capitalized by Bitcoin owned by the Department of Treasury that was forfeited as part of the criminal or civil asset forfeiture proceedings. Anyways, so yeah, Department of the Treasury.
Now, does the
So
Treasury own Bitcoin? Any
technically, under
Bitcoin?
this, I think that would be the case. Um,
Or maybe
but
this is Bitcoin that they've seized from
yeah, this is
bad people?
this is Bitcoin they've seized from ostensibly bad people, which I don't trust our government to. Sorry,
Yeah.
I just don't. With the civil asset forfeiture issue, that's a big one. A lot of libertarians have spoken out about that, and
So they got all this Bitcoin that's been seized. What do we do with it? So the
right.
president wants to
Um,
make a reserve.
Yeah, but one of the issues, though, is by the government owning a significant stockpile of cryptocurrencies, they become a whale, and they are investors, right? And so, like, they're effectively shareholders in this speculated asset now, and they've got to figure something out with that, right? So anyways, so that's concerning to me because I don't think the government should own anything that is a. There will be people who are like kind of, I won't say purists, but people who will debate me on this, who argue this and say, well, everything is fiat, everything is a speculated asset. If you think about it, I'm like, no, not really. Like, you can't just print more gold, and you can mine more. That would be fantastic. Um, anyways, there are pretty big differences. Part of the reason why, like, and the Constitution does specify nothing but gold or silver coin can be legal tender, and by straying from that, that's how we got into this predicament. So, like,
Long time ago.
if you have some forfeited Bitcoin, what that means, by the way, this is interesting, actually. Okay, sorry, a little bit of Fourth Amendment privacy concerns right here. What it means for the government to own somebody else's cryptocurrency is the government now has presumably exclusive access to the password to this digital wallet, or else they have some kind of mechanism to freeze the funds so that they can't transfer within the blockchain, which really defeats the argument to the extent that defeats the argument that blockchain is actually truly decentralized because governments can still like freeze assets and monopolize them. But basically, they've got someone else's intellectual property. How did that happen? And like,
Yeah.
I don't care if you're a criminal defendant. I don't care if you're, just a civilian and you have this civil asset forfeiture that some police officer got some goodies on you. Uh, Even if he had a warrant and he found out your password to your crypto wallet or something like that, that's still your property, no matter who you are. You actually cannot forfeit your property to the government. That doesn't work. So like these assets should not even exist as such in the government's hands. So like I think that's how we would dispose of this issue. But anyways, I did want to, because we brought up the I don't remember how we got on the track honestly of the cryptocurrency, the Bitcoin thing, but that was a related concern to the sovereign wealth fund, right? Is basically you have this whale, and the government can now put a pretty big thumb on the scale of trading these presumably these pretendedly now private assets, right? And private stocks and private and that's basically a form of insider trading.
Well,
Because
yeah, I don't see that that's any worse than taxing somebody and spending it.
I think it is, because it has a much bigger ripple effect throughout the economy, right? Because we see this with the crypto markets, because Trump goes onto social media regularly, as does Elon Musk, and they'll send out big bombastic messages about Bitcoin and stuff like that, right? And we know that one of the classic indicators of, you're being scammed when it comes to crypto or something like that is somebody, private messages you on X or something like that and says, or goes and creates a big YouTube video and says, "Hey, I'm mining this coin. It's going to go to the moon," right? Elon did that a ton with his Dogecoin, by the way. Sorry to get into Elon already, but like he did that a ton, and he was like, "Yeah, it's going to go to the moon and stuff, and it's gonna take off. It's going to be so awesome," and it's just like, wow, what? That's if these people have these big social media megaphones, they know they're influencers. I saw this with the Chia mining craze. I'll just explain it for any viewers who are like not familiar with this phenomenon. There were these guys who'd go out and just create these videos and be like, "Wow, I just bought all this computer hardware so that I could go and mine Chia coins. They're this really cool, green, economical new cryptocurrency, and here's how to mine them, and blah blah blah. And this is going to make us so much money, and you should totally do it." Right? That was basically the messaging. And then these people would go out and buy all this hardware, and they would maybe even try to go buy the coin to be an early adopter, hoping that it's going to skyrocket, like you're saying. Sorry, the screen reflection. But
Yeah.
just hoping you. But these influencers who are the early adopters, it's literally a pyramid scheme for one, and they know that. They know that it's a pyramid scheme. They know that themselves getting rich depends on other people buying into it. And then once other people buy into it, where it's a nice, sweet selling point, they're going to sell. And that is the definition and nature of a pump and dump scheme. And so you have your president of the United States, as well as his right-hand man, using social media and using their position in government and their highly unpredictable influence, in some sense, unpredictable and timing-wise, of when they're going to do stuff in that will greatly affect these markets. These markets become very volatile. And so, people who followed Trump's advice would go and buy a whole bunch of Bitcoin. And then there was a big plunge of Bitcoin. And, oh no, people are scared. And then people are like, oh, go and buy the dip. But it's literally a pump and dump scheme. And who holds most of the crypto assets in the world? We don't even know who this Satoshi Nakamoto guy is who purportedly created Bitcoin. He's sitting on like $100 billion worth of it today. And what I've heard from some people who really get behind the Trump and Elon phenomenon is, and who love cryptocurrencies, they'll say, well, that account's never going to become active. Don't worry, he's like probably dead or something. And I'm like, really? You're just going to hope that this guy who created the system just magically died or forgot his password or something? I don't think so. I don't think so, right? And the more, and it's gullible Americans, frankly. It's people who, most of whom probably can't even afford this, because they're looking for a get-rich-quick scheme. A lot of people are living from paycheck to paycheck, and they're like really desperate, and they know the dollar's failing, so they're like, oh, I know, Trump, he's our savior. Let's go buy Bitcoin. And so they dump their like $400 paycheck that they just got, that they need for rent next month, into this crypto scheme, and then overnight, poof, it's gone down to like 320 or 370 or something like that. They're just losing money. They're hemorrhaging money. The poor people are hemorrhaging money, and the people who are profiting off of it are these insider traders. And so Maybe a different. You could argue that it's a distinct concept from socialism, but I do have this concern with Trump and Elon that they are literally doing insider trading in plain sight because they are, you could say, experimenting, but they're throwing out these really volatile mass messaging, and they know they're very influential, and they also control the policy. That's too much power right there for somebody in government. Like so, Trump's executive orders on Bitcoin do affect people's prices. They affect people's decisions to buy or sell. And if you just have these enormous amounts of it, the government can just mobilize at will. That's another lever that they can use to redistribute means. That's not a lever they should have. So the sovereign wealth fund thing and the Bitcoin strategic reserve, the government should not have that. Shouldn't have either of those weapons at their disposal.
With every member of Congress, but they have to do that. They have to do that work as well. I doubt that they're manipulating them intentionally, but they certainly know what's going on. And you see this where they're able to trade stock in a company when they know that something's going to happen to that company. Well, they have to do that work, but at the same time, they have stock portfolios. So we would hope that they wouldn't use that information.
We'd hope, but if we don't have any check on it,
but it's legal for them to do it. So it's like in my job, if I knew something's going to happen and I know that my company is going to increase its stock price by doing some special deed, I know it's going to happen, so I invest in it. Is that insider trading? I don't know. I have to have my money invested somewhere.
So the insider trading, I think that issue surfaces because of it's not the exact same phenomenon as private-public partnerships when it comes to government entities. Like, there's such a thing as insider trading with respect to a private business. It's I know that my company is going to do X, Y, Z, and I'm going to sell my stock before my company does this or something, right? So there are laws that regulate that and so on. I won't claim to be a guru on those, but definitely if somebody in the government does know, hey, we're about to issue an executive order on Bitcoin.
Yeah, intentionally manipulating the market, yes, that's illegal. You could
Yes.
prosecute for it. But if you're just a casual investor, maybe not.
Well, and so our president is intentionally manipulating the market, as is Elon using his massive social media megaphone.
I don't.
Right?
You'd have to have evidence of that. That he sold his Bitcoin before he made an announcement or something like that.
So you could look for indications like that, but I'm saying the bare minimum. I want these controls gone. They shouldn't have power over this at all. If they so much as have reserved to themselves the power to move this stuff around,
they have to do the job too.
Well, I don't see why the president doing his job necessitates that he have a strategic Bitcoin reserve, or that the government, even retain control over these, forfeited.
Throw the ideas out there. I mean, he'll throw ideas out and he kind of tests the water. Sometimes I think he does it just to play the media. They'll take the hook.
Well,
and then that clears him, so he doesn't take heat on some other issue. And I've seen him do that, during his whole first term. He would throw something out there he knew the media would grab a hold of, and they take it and run with it, and it takes the heat off somewhere else. He knows he can't do it, but he throws that balloon out there.
That's the exact same strategy, by the way, that the mainstream media have historically used, and the Democrats have used to try to get bad policies installed. Is they go and they do test the waters. They test the public response. They'll say we're doing this, and they'll see how people respond. And if they can get away with it, if there's not sufficient pushback, maybe they just go straight forward with it. Like if I were a Gadianton, I'm not living in a realm of hope here. Just hope and trust that they'll do the right thing. I have to think. I've increasingly begun to think more like a Gadianton. If I were a Gadianton robber, if I wanted to actually destroy America, if I wanted to go and carve it up and split the gains with the global communists, what would I do? There would be some learning aspect to it. There would be some, let's do crazy stuff, and let's backwalk some stuff, and let's test the waters here, let's test the waters there. This is exactly the behavior we you would see. You would see this hog wild kind of let's go monkey with everything, let's go fiddle with a whole bunch of stuff, and let's go and observe cause and effect, cause and effect. Let's see how it affects the markets. Let's see how it affects people's trust. Let's see if we get sued for doing this. Let's see if people threaten to sue. Let's see if, let's see how the influencers out there respond so that we know who our yes men are, for one, and we know what we can get away with, right? And we just just exploit the things you can get away with, and the things you can't get away with right now, you work with it, you work at it, you spray some WD-40 on that stubborn bolt, that stubborn influencer there, and that, it is, I will grant you that I do very much believe that it is testing the waters, but it's testing the waters for the purpose of exploitation. It's not testing the waters to see just for fun or to try to save America or anything like that. I'm not under that.
You'd have to have evidence that he would be exploiting it. We all do this on Facebook. We make a post, and we kind of test. We know who our friends are. We know who is on the other side of the issue just by reading posts on Facebook. But we're not trying to exploit anyone in the process. We're just testing.
I think this might be our biggest point of disagreement here, right here. I'm just going to say that because I would submit very, very strongly. I would urge that you don't threaten to do like massive tariffs or something like that, or reciprocal tariffs. You don't threaten to do, a sovereign wealth fund. You don't threaten to have a strategic Bitcoin reserve. You don't threaten those things, and you definitely don't actually do them either, because, among other things, any good, intelligent, wholesome, sensible person has no need whatsoever to, I guess, test the waters on those things, because they're things that no sane, honorable, moral, respectable person would even think about doing, right? So I'm not going to go onto my social media tonight and then just say,
we do like that, but it's in our small realm, which is nothing like being president of the United States. But in our little small realm, yeah, we make those kind of tests. We throw things out to check someone. You make a crazy, very right-wing statement to see who responds to it. Maybe you make those statements because you just don't have time to make that long, drawn-out statement. So we make a generalization. If I don't want to waste a lot of time, I've got some Facebook posts, some pages that I follow where some people are just real flaming progressives, and they'll make some crazy post, and it's just nutty post. And I respond with little one-word responses that I know just will tick them off. But it says everything I need to say in just one word. But I do a one-word response because I just don't want to explain everything again to these same people. But I feel that I need to respond. So President Trump, and you'll see him do this a lot. He'll throw something out there just to get people talking. With the tariffs, it's a great example. He says he wants the world to know that he's in charge. So the way he communicates that to the world is he says, look, I will tariff you the same amount that you tariff us. He was a little more generous than that. He did it 50% of what their tariffs were on us. And everybody hemmed and hawed, well, he's never going to do that because he can't, or he wouldn't dare. Well, he did. And that showed the world that he's in charge. And then he backs off on them, put a 30 or a 90-day pause on tariffs. But China responded in the wrong way. So what does he do to China? He increased it. He doubled it. And he's just showing China that America is in charge. We are bigger than you are. And we're going to be a bully, like you say, in the world market. We're not going to let you take advantage of us anymore. And the whole world knows that now. We didn't know that 2 weeks ago, but they know it now. Are they going to test him again? Probably not. We all hope that at the end of the road, there are zero tariffs, that no country tariffs each other. I think that's the goal. We'll see. You think it's going to be productive? The stock market went down. The stock market came back up. I follow my NVDA stock. It's not up where it was when he became president. If you have NVDA stock, it was like 146.
Yeah, there have been a number of things that have affected the prices there, including China's
down to
DeepSeek model.
It went down to 80.
Ago. But I will say this, like Trump, and I do want to address as well just the, trying to test people out there, but Trump trying to tell all these other countries that we're in charge, America's in charge. He used the same language in his executive order on the sovereign wealth fund, that we should demonstrate our international leadership, basically. And isn't that just globalism? If he's wanting to control other countries, I understand the argument of let's actually look out for ourselves. But if he's meddling with other countries and really,
well, I don't think he's intentionally trying to meddle with another country. He wants it to be fair. And this is the way he gets it.
I do have more to say on the tariffs because I have some personal experience with this.
Oh, I know you. I don't
specifically with NVIDIA, but
I don't like tariffs. I don't like us tariffing people. I don't like them putting tariffs on us. It's a form of taxation.
It is a form of taxation, and let's go ahead and maybe let me put an asterisk there. I do just want to my spirit still says I want to push back against the notion of testing people out because I don't want to do that. I try not to do that in person. I try not to do that on social media. I think that if I do go and say things that I don't mean, even just to get a response out of people, even just to test them, then I am being a bully. I am being insincere. I'm not being genuine. And, you brought up the example of people who just would use an overly succinct portrayal of something to try to get a point across or something like that.
Right.
I've done that. I've used a meme, for example, on abortion. Right. I used a meme to try to make a valid point, what I believe is a valid point about abortion, and then some person who disagrees with me politically claims that, oh, you're not considering this case, and I'm like, no, I very much am. In fact, here's the church handbook specifically stating these couple of exceptions for the cases that you raised, right?
Yep.
And so I take I reserve the right to do what the Savior reserves the right to do. He tells us in the Book of Mormon, he says, because that I have spoken one word, ye need not suppose that I cannot speak another.
Right.
And so, I try to avoid grotesque oversimplifications. There have been many times when I'll say something and people are mad at me because they're like, well, you didn't say this other thing too. And I'm like, if I had said that other thing too, people would complain that it's too long. So you gotta have some reasonable back and forth. But I want to do it in good faith. I would just still push back and say, I never want to do anything in bad faith. And I do verily believe that, trying to saying things you don't mean or doing things that would cause harm and then doing them and then walking them back, etc., is a legitimately it's a maniacal approach. It's a very sadistic approach. It does inflict harm. And if I'm going to go to the market question, people can only invest sanely and reliably when there are indicators of reliability that you're actually going to get a return on your investment. So even if it is just this silly flip-flop game of, oh, let's threaten a tariff, let's threaten a reciprocal tariff, let's do it this way, and then actually impose it, and then whoops, we walk it back this much, and now we'll double it, right? Every investor out there who's thinking of putting money into any of these things, they're just frozen stiff right now because they're like,
oh yeah, it ripples through the economy. Sure.
I'm not putting money into that because I don't know if we're gonna get, if the driver of this truck, this bus is gonna slam on the brakes and I'm gonna find myself on the windshield one moment, and then he's going to, like, I don't know what's going to happen. This is a volatile, it's a dangerous, it is a destructive pattern. And a person who loves America will not do that. That is something you can say categorically. And I'll just bring up my own experience with tariffs because I have lost, personally, thousands of dollars to Trump's tariffs. And here's the rationale. I'm an AI researcher. I work in, there's no such thing as AI, but machine learning is the term I like to use for it. And I did dabble in some crypto mining back in the day during the crypto boom. And that's part of the reason why I got burned by that. And I realized, oh, I shouldn't play with that because it's a rich man's game. It's a pyramid scheme. It's a pump and dump. It's totally not worth it. Anyways, people can disagree with me on that as well. If you disagree with me on that, anybody, feel free to debate me on crypto because I did put up a video on that recently too. And it's a great way to lose your life savings. And it's a gamble, basically. It's a casino. It's a rich man's game. But anyways, I digress on the crypto thing. I'm going to try to confine my remarks here to my profession, which is in machine learning. So for my own education, for my own projects, for my own development, for my own side businesses, I had to go and out of my own money, go and purchase these graphics cards, these GPUs that are used to train these deep learning models. And they were crazy expensive during the pandemic. And so Trump, during his first term in office, imposed these tariffs on GPUs, and then Biden kept them. And now Trump is back in office again, and he's doubling down on them, and he's threatening to amplify them. And while they might be exempt from some of the tariffs for like semiconductors, there's the thing of, oh yeah, I'm going to tariff them at 100%. Oh no, actually, I'm still going to be 10%. And then but he also has these aluminum tariffs that are like 25%, and those actually do get applied to GPUs. Anyways, I'm getting a little bit complicated here, but I'm going to try to keep the message super simple here because like me actually paying out of pocket several $1,000s more just to be able to run a business and take care of my family, that's a serious impediment to my growth as an American. That was not an American first policy because you realize these graphics cards, they are manufactured overseas. They're manufactured predominantly in Taiwan and China. And if we tariff them, guess what? These graphics cards, they're designed in the USA. It's an American product, American intellectual property. We ship it to Taiwan, we ship it to China, and then we pay our own government more money for our own product, which actually, at the same time, those foreign countries, even the worst diplomatic enemies of the United States, can actually purchase our bleeding edge AI and crypto hardware at a discount relative to your American consumers, because the American consumers are paying a tariff and the foreigners are not, because it's their own domestic product in theory, right? And so tariffs really only work you actually have a domestic manufacturing base to protect. And if you, seeing as we don't in the semiconductor space at least, and practically everything else, steel, aluminum, you name it, like we do have some, but it's not sufficient to meet consumer demand, where it's regulated, or it's been monopolized by the military or something like that, right? We do not produce what we consume in this country. And so imposing tariffs right now is actually a fatally bad idea because it only inflicts pain on Americans. It doesn't actually bring back industry here, by the way, because you're actually sapping the capital that Americans need to be able to invest in those facilities here. And so if we do ever get semiconductor manufacturing back here in the United States and the other crucial infrastructure and all of our domestic economy back, it will only be under the thumb of socialism. It will only be through these subsidies. The companies that get the government subsidies to go and do these things, like through the CHIPS Act and stuff, those are going to be the only players. Because private investors can't afford to anymore, because they've already been bled dry paying a huge markup for these already super overpriced things that are being imported from China just to stay afloat. So this is my own personal experience. If anybody wants me to unpack this more, if you want more detail on this, I can give more detail. But the objective facts of the matter are these tariffs wound Americans, and they do not help us at all. Like not even considering the investor side of the equation, just the consumer side. It's all pain.
Now, what happens in your business if China drops all of their tariffs? We both go to zero.
So if China drops all of theirs, that won't matter because I don't produce anything that China consumes. So China's tariffs being zero wouldn't do anything. If the American tariffs on imports from China drop to zero,
Yeah.
then yeah, I could in theory be paying less for these GPUs. I don't know if that's going to happen because I've seen the effect.
And that is what's happening with other countries right now.
It's if I don't buy anything from that country though, that's no benefit to me.
Well, saying that I'm just using that as an example. Countries have had tariffed us are now dropping down closer to zero because the tariff war. So there is a chance that China's could be dropped to zero, and that might help you.
If Trump were to respond, I can just try to prognosticate and tell you where I think this is going. I'm going to try to read a move or two ahead here on this point, because what Trump is doing is directly abetting Chinese communism. Like the tariffs on GPUs for years now, it's like what 7-8 years I think of GPU tariffs. They have already handed to China on a silver platter to foreign superpowers that are run by parties that are not friendly to American ideals, sadly. It's handed to them AI and crypto supremacy on a silver platter. We're giving them our best products at a discount compared to what our own people pay for them.
We didn't do it, but some capitalists did, sure.
Well, the tariffs enforce that. The tariffs impose a situation where if I were the government of one of these foreign countries, and you produce the GPUs right there, and they're American intellectual property, but they're assembled there or whatever, oh, let's just go ahead and buy X number of these at volume. Like, it came out last year that they had who knows how many of these bleeding edge chips that they weren't even supposed to have due to export controls in the United States, but you can't have export controls in the United States that actually prevent the country that manufactures that stuff from obtaining it, right?
Right.
Anyways, so the sellout, we know that a huge part of the sellout of the American people already occurred by outsourcing our industry overseas. And now the tariffs actually exacerbate that because, again, like the principle, the operating principle of a tariff, a tariff is not inherently unconstitutional. Excise, imposts, and duties, those are three of the constitutionally authorized taxes. The fourth is a census tax. And yes, you can do that, but that a tariff presupposes that you have a domestic manufacturing base to protect that is able to meet consumer demand. Otherwise, it's basically like a monopoly, where the person who has the monopoly, hey, he's got a monopoly, right? And so he can ratchet up the prices all he wants, and it doesn't hurt him, because everyone's forced to go buy from them anyway. And that's exactly what's happened with AI and crypto. So it's not surprising to me in the least, actually, that the strategy collectively between Trump and these other countries is that these other countries make the concessions so they can bow, so they can make news headlines, because that's one of the most profitable outcomes for the Trump campaign, for the Trump's administration, is to make it look like that they're now bowing to American supremacy or something like that. And China being the stick in the mud, because that's practically speaking the only one that matters for a huge percentage of our consumer products here are just imported from China. We know this. And so it's not a big deal if, okay, I guess it's only a tiny hit. Like it's the tune of $10 or $15 a year, maybe, if that. There's a tariff on shirts made in Bangladesh. Okay, I own a shirt from Bangladesh, right? But like I have spent literally thousands of dollars on products that are manufactured only in one very specific geographic region and is way out there and it's outsourced, and they're not behaving favorably towards us with the tariffs, right? But
you remember that President Trump's stated goal is to have zero tariffs.
Stated goal, but Jesus said, by their fruits you shall know them. And so I take that for what it is. It's by their fruits you shall know them, not by their fair promises.
That's happening in other countries. Now, not China yet. And I buy car parts. And I look at, I just put some rotors on my car. Okay. And I paid more money for those parts because typically I would buy the cheap ones from China. And I figure I pay 20% more. But I believe that next year I will be paying 20% less because I think China will drop their tariffs, we'll drop our tariffs. And I can buy those Chinese produce products again at a much lower cost.
Yeah, I don't predict that that's going to be the outcome. I think it's kind of obvious to me anyway. I think
That may happen with your your computer hardware as well.
China is very much flexing, the way I see it, and
You don't think they'll back down?
I don't think they will. They might maneuver the pieces a little bit differently. I was going to point out there's one thing we're not.
'Cause
One
they
of the
need
things they
to
did.
sell, they need to sell to us.
Well, they can keep
provide-
moving the chess pieces, right? Um, so they can still get our business because they have a practical monopoly on most of these articles anyway. That we're so basically the only difference now is Americans are paying more, American finances are getting drained more, and our government is getting enriched more. But the American people aren't benefited. We're not actually moving industry here anymore. It's the same situation as previously. We're just paying more.
Well, I don't think
Um,
they monopoly though. You just said that you could buy yours from Taiwan.
Most things no, like including graphics cards actually, because they're the you know
Is
the
China?
chips. The chips are manufactured in Taiwan, but then they all go to China for assembly, and so the country we import them from is China, and so the China tariffs are
And
the
it'll
only thing that really matters there.
take time for some other country to tool up to do that, to replace.
And microchip fabs are exorbitantly expensive and take many years to build.
I'm sure they are. Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons why imposing these massive tariffs now is just to bleed out the American people. If you wanted to save America, what you would do is you'd build up, you'd ramp up, you'd deregulate to the maximum extent that you can to foster that growth domestically, and then you would, and then you might impose a mild judicious tariff, like a judicious tariff being one that like it's graduated, it's gradual. It's like it gives people time to adapt. It's not this hyper volatile thing, right? You could even be on a trajectory and say we're going to take it from this point and we're going to scale it up to that point. We're going to do so linearly, month by month or year over year or something like that. But at least have a plan that's stated in advance and that you stick to, and that would actually drive up wholesome investment that you could then protect and so on. The president shouldn't have the power to do that anyway.
Trump wants to get it done. He certainly wants to get it done. He wants to have a good, booming economy before the midterm elections.
Well,
Really,
and
a lot of time.
he does have an incentive, I suppose, to make good appearances. But for my purposes, everything in this conversation, I'm trying to limit to just what are the fruits of their actions, not what do I think they feel or think they want, or should I trust that? Like, my answer is if they take on power that they shouldn't have, then they already lose right there. They already lose the point. So, if somebody says have a sovereign wealth fund and the Constitution says you shouldn't do that or doesn't authorize them to do that, like, whatever their motivations are, that doesn't even weigh into that equation because it's a socialistic behavior. You observe the pattern, you observe which direction they're moving. And even if we think they're really great people who want what's best for America, okay, what about the next administration? Given that precedent, given all these tools, given all this power that was just consolidated.
Tariffs. I don't think raising or lowering tariffs makes President Trump a socialist.
Okay, well, anyways, on the point of tariffs, I would just try to wrap up this one by saying, whom have they benefited? They have almost exclusively benefited our foreign adversaries, the global communists. Those are the ones who have, in fact, disproportionately profited for years in the very most important industry sectors, at a minimum, from the tariffs. That's been the effect. And the fact that Biden kept the Trump tariffs shows you it's a bipartisan thing in a sense. Both of the parties are in on this. They both think this is a good idea, or at least their puppet master thinks it's a good idea.
Yeah.
And I was going to bring up one more point about the tariffs, and that was what I think. Even if this back and forth that we've just seen in the last couple of days with China turns out to, let's say they drop them back to zero. Let's say that happens. One of the things that China slapped on us is export controls now from China. They just passed a law that says they're no longer allowed to export certain precious rare earth materials that are crucial for semiconductor manufacturing elsewhere. So if Trump's bid is let's bring semiconductor manufacturing back to the States, but we're reliant on Chinese exports even to make them, and China says, no, you can't have them.
Yeah, we have to buy earth minerals from somewhere else.
Right, or mine them ourselves, which we don't even have the tooling or the infrastructure or a lot of the expertise to do, most likely because we've never invested in that, or at least that we don't have the industry for that. because of all the EPA regulations and stuff like that. So that's a set spike right there. The
Yep.
EPA killed our domestic manufacturing, and now we're reliant on China. And so one way or another, if we're still beholden to them, that's not actually a win for the American people, right? So anyways, so I'm just asking, with the tariffs, who benefits? The American people are decidedly not benefiting right now. And the only claim that proponents of the tariff policies can make, I believe, is that, well, it's done with good intentions, or it might eventually bear good fruit. And to me, that's an extraordinary claim that requires evidence, because I'm not seeing the evidence right now that it will have that effect, even remotely predictably. Because if you wanted to restore manufacturing, you would have an actual plan, and you would communicate that plan in advance, and you would stick to it
Right.
instead of playing this chicken game, which just ruins investment.
Yeah, none of that will happen in 3 months, but we're hoping in 12 months we'll
And
be on the other side of it.
we shall see what happens in 12 months. But given the fact that I already have sizable data points here to the tune of potentially trillions of dollars of value that has been basically gifted to our foreign adversaries to give them a head start and to prop up their crypto and AI infrastructure through the tariffs that we've already seen. I haven't paid attention to the entire markets. That's a slice of the market that I've been paying attention to because it impacts me personally. But I can see that transfer of wealth. Where did it go? Where did it come from? It came from us, and it went to the global communists. That's exactly where it went, and that's exactly
As it
why.
has for about 40 years. Yeah.
And so seeing that this actually is a continuation of that, I'm not expecting an about face. I'm not expecting an amelioration of those conditions within 12 months.
Yep. And I hope it stops that transfer of wealth.
And anyways, we can get more into the future prognostications. I am going to make some pretty bold predictions about some of these things, and I'll just say one of them is, if I think I already said it actually, but if we do bring back semiconductor manufacturing here, it's going to be socialized because of the subsidies. It's not going to be private sector stuff at all by a long shot.
We'll have to do that again in a couple of years.
It's going to be super subsidized stuff. So I'm going to get to point number 4. I have 5 points on each of these. So Trump and Elon, and we haven't even gotten to Elon yet. But another point we could probably just mention in passing is price controls on drugs. This was from an executive order issued today. I think it was it today or no? Give me a second. Let me open it up. But the idea is Trump has in fact issued an executive order on, yes, this is dated today, April 15th. Let me share the screen here. Lowering drug prices by once again putting Americans first. Yeah, so he likes to, here we go. And what it is, in a nutshell, is he's vying for Congress to impose price controls on our prescription drugs, and integrating with Medicare and everything. And we know he's not getting rid of Medicare. As far as what direction is this going, is he going to lower prices? Well, the promise is that he's going to lower prices, but how does he purport to achieve it? Well, through price controls. And so that's prevent drug manufacturers from charging our patients much higher prices than what's found abroad, right? So he's claiming that we'll fix this long-term problem that we've had, but the reality is the manufacturers still need to recoup their costs. And one of the traditional pricing models is that they would sell them at a higher price here in the United States, where people could afford to pay more historically, and then sell them for a discount abroad, right? And that's kind of ignoring the national side of that equation, national boundaries. That's kind of a common business practice. Is you do want to have your kind of higher tier subscription members that you basically use to recover your R&D and your manufacturing costs, and then you have I guess the bulk of the service that your company is performing, which you provided at a discount or something like that. But yeah, it's just barely varnished, if varnished at all, price controls, which are not going to help us with inflation or with costs ultimately. So that's another one where I would say, yeah, that's ringing my socialism alarm bell, saying you don't impose price controls on your people on any sector of the economy unless you are a socialist, because you're trying to put your thumb on the scale and you're trying to make yourself look good on that. But just like with the minimum wage laws, which I think J.D. Vance was in favor of, they have the exact opposite effect of what their stated, claimed, intended effect is, right? So we have to be really careful about that.
Right. Yeah, let the market decide.
Yeah, so that's another intervention point here.
Except that sometimes the market, the big companies gobble up small companies. That's a part of the market I don't like. But, yeah, I'm not a fan of price controls, of course.
Yeah, well, and big companies gobbling up small companies is less of an issue when the government isn't subsidizing any of the companies. There is some natural like nonlinearity to the seesaw of market share because of the self-reinforcing effect of I'll just call it the bandwagon effect. If you have company A, company B, they both purport to provide the same type of product and everything. They're serving the same market, as it were, and so you're looking at the seesaw of market share just between these two companies, and one of them starts to take the lead. Well, then the messaging behind that, the word of mouth, the news headlines and stuff that get generated around that say basically, oh, this one has better reviews, so of course more people are going to shift to that. So like that is a natural phenomenon that we can't control, and we shouldn't try to control that because the minute you try to control it, then you're picking winners and losers, right? So yeah, there is an element of that's natural, but my sneaking suspicion is if we look behind all the antitrust and anti-monopoly laws and stuff, we'll find that they're actually creating and amplifying the very problem they're pretending to solve.
Right.
So those are the main ones I had for Trump. Point number 5 was the tariffs, and we already covered that pretty thoroughly, I think. So, do you want to dive into the gory details of how Elon Musk is a socialist?
Well, let me kind of wrap up with President Trump. I think we are less of a socialist country. We're further away from socialism now under Trump than we were under the previous administration.
Okay. Can you provide, what do you want to share to try to persuade me of that?
Well, massive deregulation, allowing oil companies to drill when they want to drill, reducing the size of government, certainly a big one. Using the bully pulpit to get the NATO countries to pay their fair share. That's good. We hope that at some point we can start paying down the debt and get that under control. I think that he's done, in just the 3 months he's been in office, he's done a lot of things that bring us further from socialism. We still do plenty of socialistic things in America, but I think we're on a better track than before. So I find it really hard to say that he's a socialist if he's trying to wean us off of socialism. Still mistakes that you pointed out, but my argument would be that he's not a socialist. He's trying to get us away from those things. If we can reduce the size of government and waste and corruption, fraud, open fraud in government, those are good things. And we need to give him some kudos on that and see what happens in the future. That's my argument.
Okay. I'm going to, it's all right, just try to respond to each of those pretty briefly here, and we'll move on to Elon Musk. If you want to say anything more on this, that'd be great.
Well, I don't know if you should, because you gave your side of the...
I already gave my side? Okay, so we're going to try to follow some outline here. Say,
yeah,
do you think deregulating?
Yeah, we don't want to go back.
Okay. Well, I mean, I never, I guess, had, if those were brought up at the last point, I guess I never had opportunity to address the reducing size of government, bully pulpit on NATO, deregulating specifically. But if those are your evidences for it, maybe we'll get into them a little bit with Elon Musk, because he's more on the side of Doge with reducing government stuff and
that's true.
Ostensibly paving the way for the deregulation that is purported to have occurred and so on, right?
We hope, yes.
So, yeah, let's just do it that way. We'll go ahead and address Elon, and we'll definitely touch on those themes, all because those are common things that I've heard, and it's predominantly through Elon Musk's platform actually that we get that messaging, right? So,
well, but the buck stops at President Trump. I mean, he brought him in, and President Trump makes the decisions. Elon Musk is he's just an employee.
Yeah, just an employee. Well,
He's a very good employee.
okay. Well, I'm gonna try to change your mind.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to show you who he's working for, and it's not we the people.
All right.
So point number one, I'm going to summon to the witness stand his own very luxurious and abundant government subsidies, and this is something you can Google. You can ask Grok, Elon Musk's own AI chatbot thingy, and he has received to the tune of $38 billion or more in government subsidies. And I've actually conducted a little bit further analysis on this because some people will try to, drill a little bit deeper and say, well, some of that was in contracts, right, for SpaceX, and because he got paid these contracts and stuff. And I'm like, okay, yeah, there are contracts and there are subsidies. There are direct subsidies, there are indirect subsidies. There are a lot of different things. There were tax incentives for the electric vehicles that actually gave him a very much a competitive advantage in trying to sell his Tesla cars. So I did a little bit of a deeper dive, and I went to macrotrends.net, and you can look at a chart for the year-over-year profitability of Elon Musk's companies. So I just went in search of data on this because I'm like, okay, what is the impact? I wanted to estimate what's the impact that subsidies had on Elon Musk's financial empire, because his net worth today is something like $370 billion. And so I want to quantify things, right? Data scientist is one of the things I do. And it turns out that for the first many years of Tesla's existence, it was operating entirely in the red. And it wasn't even until 2020 that Tesla had even 1 year where it was not operating in the red, when it was actually profitable. They had actual net operating income as a company. And it just so happens that with all these years of operating deficits to the tune of $1 billion to $2 billion a year, if you look at Elon Musk's net throughout this period, you'll find that his net worth was not sufficient to keep his enterprises afloat until a point where they could then become profitable. So it was actually those subsidies that rescued his companies from failure. And also, so there were at least two prongs to it. One was the direct government bailouts and subsidies, which were just kind of paid in cash, and some of them were loans that he later repaid and so on. But if that didn't happen, just saying, if that didn't happen, the chances that Tesla would even be an existing company today, I estimate to be very, very low, right? And similarly with SpaceX. I mean, SpaceX could not operate without government contracts and so on, right?
Yeah, he wouldn't have built Tesla if he couldn't get loans.
And this is the thing, though, is that it took a very long time. It took many years. So I don't know if you see the axis right here. So we're talking 2010 up until 2020. We're talking a decade.
Well, the graph looks like it went a little bit low, and you say those are billions of dollars, but gosh, it must have gone really high towards the end there, because it looks like he's making a ton of money.
Yeah, he's making a ton of money because he's finally got the volume of production. He's finally got the PR. He's finally got, I guess maybe the bugs worked out more. I mean, there's been some recent YouTubers who deconstructed that, but
I heard that Tesla was the largest automobile company in America, by far. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they source their parts from China, though.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, a lot of their most expensive parts they actually source from China. They claim that they source a lot of it domestically, which I think is true for some of the more just kind of dumb parts.
Well, they're going to go where they can get it the cheapest, and that's China.
But anyways, so I don't know about you, but if I'm looking at a business venture and I'm like, hey guys, I've got this rabid proposition, I'm going to go ahead and get a whole bunch of government subsidies, and even notwithstanding all of those subsidies and tax credits to the tune of $7,500 per vehicle sold, that they get bailed out to the consumer who buys this. He gets this $7,500 tax credit just for purchasing an electric vehicle. So despite that thumb on the scale and all these bailouts and subsidies, I'm going to be operating in the red for 10 plus years, and I'm going to need like $10+ billion of just upfront, capital investments before you guys will even see a dime of. It's like I don't think anybody would buy that. I don't see any investor who's like, yeah, let's totally like go and give you $10 billion over the next 10 years and
Same
just
thing
burn
with
all that money and hope that it works out.
every solar company that comes to the door. They're all operating because of subsidies.
They operate because of subsidies, yeah.
Yeah,
So
Tesla would be a different company if he hadn't taken loans. May not even exist, or maybe exist on a much smaller scale.
well,
And
the fact is, without investment, it would not have been liquid. They would have gone bankrupt many years
yeah,
ago.
and the government decided they wanted electric cars, so they subsidized not just Tesla, but a lot of different companies. And that now they shouldn't do that. That's picking winners and losers.
Okay, so they did that to Elon. It's true that they did it to some others.
But
But like just
I don't blame a company for accepting those. Like the solar guy that comes to my door, I don't blame him for taking that government subsidy and using it to build a company, because they're just trying to make a living. But I don't want government to be doing it.
and I agree. It's just I mean you look at all the
Like,
businesses.
yeah, it's like if you take a tax write off, um, today's tax day. If you took a bunch of government tax write offs that they allow you to take, mortgage and everything, is that bad? We
You know,
we would like the government not to give those, but I certainly don't blame anyone for taking them.
I'm going to walk back my response to that actually, and just say like I think there is.
The
Let,
government offered Elon Musk subsidies. He took them.
let me put it this way. I'm one of those Americans who has been buying American made for decades, like all my life.
And
I
I
have
have,
resisted. I have only like when it's absolutely impossible to meet like a need, like very rare exceptions, I will buy something off the shelf that's made in China. I try to buy secondhand for anything I can, because that's so like in a sense, yeah, that's a subsidy. Maybe it's not the exact same thing as a subsidy, but it's like our government has subsidized China, if you want to put it that way, by
sure.
giving them this unfair trade deal, which now Trump is claiming to reverse, but actually it's still unfair in China's favor. It is to this day. That's objective, right?
Okay.
Anyways, but I don't think it's true that maybe we could say we can't fault them for it, but at the same time we got to be really careful because like I would I don't want to accept any subsidies at all. Like if I understand arguments like, well, the government's giving our own money back to us, and I'm like, okay, that was a waste. I don't want to countenance that. We do need to find effective ways of fighting back against this. By the way, we need to find out how do we actually hold our government to accountable to like only use constitutional currency, for example. Um, and I think one of the ways is just call a spade, call a subsidy, and subsidies are socialism, and they're picking and choosing winners and losers. And it's not just this one business though either. Like practically all of Elon has a ton of different businesses. He's got the Boring Company, he's got SpaceX, he's got Tesla, he's got XAI, he's got X. Like, and each one of these, in turn, has actually benefited, whether directly or indirectly, from the government subsidy machine, right? And so, if the government keeps on choosing this one guy, yeah, they've spread it out over all these different things to make it look plausible, make it look, and it's like,
Well, they didn't choose just him. They choose industries.
well, you look at how successful they made him become, right? So, and that's he's been subsidized across the board, right? So, if you want the plausible deniability, if you're the people, the secret combinations in government who want this guy to be in charge of some big thing in the future, and you're like, that's our guy, like let's choose him. Um, for plausible deniability's sake, you would experiment with other things too, and that's a way also to test out who are your yes men. They have tryouts too because they send people a lot of cash. They're like, okay, now jump when we say jump. And if they don't, they're like, okay, you didn't make the cut, right? And so it is very much a mechanism for grooming people for roles that they want to have filled. They
Yeah,
give them a lot of cash and see what they do with it.
I see it as government buying your loyalty.
Yeah, yeah,
A lot of people that I know that are real conservative will talk the great conservative talk, and then they start being kind of quiet on certain issues. And then I find out later that they're getting welfare or something
right.
like that. So they don't talk about welfare anymore. So I'm trying to figure out, why aren't they talking about welfare being bad anymore? And then you find out that they're taking some form of welfare,
Yeah,
or with tax write-offs. The child, we benefited quite a bit. We have 9 children, so we benefited quite a bit from the child. What do they call that? You get a tax write-off.
oh, it's child. I forget what it is. Child.
Yeah, but everybody takes it,
I
and
forget what it is.
that's the way the government kind of buys your silence, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think we got to be careful about this, because we're talking about big head honchos in government who've been bought out and kind of silenced on these, not just kind of, definitely silenced on these
Oh yeah,
various issues, neutralized at least, even if
yeah.
they're vocally opposing them supposedly.
We elect
Right?
great people. They go back to Congress, and all of a sudden they start being a little more quiet, a little more quiet, a little more quiet. And gosh, in 20 years, they're progressives.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the prophets years ago pointed out too, with like home prices, that the government buys our loyalty by continuing inflation. I hadn't realized this until a handful of years ago, that conservatives, Utah conservatives, a lot of them are really silent on the subject of inflation, and they're totally okay with inflation. They're like, that's totally not socialism. It's fine. It's just the government. It's the economy operating as intended and stuff. They buy the false fiscal theory that they were taught in their public schools. Part of the reason why they have that massive buy-in is because, well, they bought these big expensive homes, right? And they want inflation to go up so that it becomes easier to pay it off, right? They want their paycheck to increase so that that huge sum of money that they got for their mortgage payment becomes, more of a drop in the bucket, right, as opposed to a huge deal. And the prophets warned us against that. They said, don't bank on inflation to pay off your home mortgage. And I thought, that's excellent advice, because, wow, I hadn't realized. Utah conservatives worldwide, nationwide, they're secretly cheering. Rah, 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 yes, inflation's higher. Woohoo! Yeah, my eggs will cost more, but my paycheck's going to grow or whatever. And it'll.
Yeah.
I got a better deal on my house than the future generations will. And I was like, ugh. And so like, I'm wearing the Ward Heaven hat. I'm not endorsed by Ward Radio, but I want to remind people always that we're still fighting that same war. Cardin Ellis goes after the boomers for like their houses that they're paying off with inflation with their grandkids, and I'm just like, guys, we got to stop. So that is a good introspection moment for us to just take a step back and say, wait a minute, how am I on the take? Analyze each of those things and be like, how is the government buying my silence? What am I secretly rooting for?
So many different ways. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, and this is basically my thesis statement for this entire discussion: is Donald Trump and Elon Musk are socialists. Yes, they fit like the undeniable categorical definitions of being socialists, and so do like, I don't know what percent, but probably the vast majority of people on both sides of the major political spectrum, including nominal conservatives, right? Self-professed conservatives. And so I'm like, I think if we cast that beam out of our eye, then we'll see clearly, and we'll be better able to analyze situations like this. That's my take on it, and I know I've been a hypocrite before too, on this, in the sense of like, there are these government programs and they sign you up for this stuff. I did the federal application for student aid, and it's like, I don't know what that is, but my parents didn't have a lot of money, and so they're like, yeah, go ahead and apply for that. It's a federal subsidy for your tuition, basically, and they get to pick and choose who gets it, kind of thing. And I'm just like, oh, well, that stinks. We should have done that, right? But and Elon Musk, he talks the talk. He talks. He's given these press releases saying, yeah, I hate the subsidies. We should get rid of subsidies. I don't like the electric vehicle tax credits and stuff. I mean, he's benefited hugely from them.
But he takes it.
And this is one of the things, is you just have to say it's more than a little bit disingenuous for somebody to get billions of dollars just because the government magically chose him, and then later say, oh, well, now I want to cut the ladder that they gave me to get up here so that no one else can climb it, right? And there are people who say Elon Musk can't be bought, and I'm like, he's already bought. What are you talking about?
Well, and I
So
do that too. I take my tax write-offs, but at the same time I say we shouldn't have those. I I pay my Social Security. I intend to take Social Security in a few years, but I don't want Social Security to exist.
I don't want it to either. Yeah, I mean
So,
they inflate away like 60-70% of its value before you
oh,
can
I
reach it.
know, no, but I want to take it. I want my money back.
Yeah,
So,
and this is one of the ways that they normalize this, right? It's because it's and this is one of my issues that I did take with Elon Musk's Doge dividend promise. Is he's like, oh, let's just give people their own money back, but it's like, in principle, even if it were true, totally true, that it were just our own money and he's just refunding it to us, I don't want to normalize this government sending us a paycheck thing.
no, I don't either.
And there's more on that with Elon. I've got a couple more points to burn through here, and I think we should wrap
Oh,
up in just a few minutes. But some of that investment for Elon, by the way, came from his primary angel investors. So he can claim that he had these private investors come and help him. They're not private. BlackRock, Vanguard, what was the other? There's a list of like the 10 biggest shareholders of Elon Musk's
yeah,
Tesla venture and
yeah,
so on.
like guys.
And you go down the list, and it's like, oh, let's go and research these guys, and they get liquid injections directly from the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. I think it is. That's the Federal Reserve. That most people think it's the Federal Reserve that prints the money. In theory, it's not. It's the Bureau of Engraving and Printing that actually generates the money. And Elon Musk bragged a couple months ago about how his Doge team found these computers that had this magical box that you just type a number into and send it to some account somewhere, and it just poof creates that money out of nowhere. He's a beneficiary of that,
Hmm.
even if only indirectly,
Yeah,
because his primary supposedly private investors are actually BlackRock, Vanguard, etc., that actually receive those direct liquid injections from the government's magical money machine. So like you look at that and it's like I'm suspicious. I'm suspicious of that. I'm just going to say that because like if I start a company and BlackRock and Vanguard start pouring money into me, and the government's like, oh, we choose you, you get this $465 million loan, we want you to succeed, then I'm like, uh oh, watch out for the hook, watch
so
out
if
for the
you're starting
strings attached.
Seth's AI company and BlackRock comes and says, I want to invest in your company and get you off the ground, you say no.
That's so far from my concept of reality that in some sense you got me kind of deer in the headlights. I don't know how to respond to that, but
You,
like I would have to acknowledge they're not a private company and they're not a private investor. I've never wanted to be beholden to anyone who's not a truly private investor, and even then, like
even though
it's
you could do so much good by building your company, help your family, and you'd say no.
let me put it this way: if there were no alternative, I might consider it. I'd want to approach it very carefully
Yeah.
because like if I lived in a full-on socialist economy, which I want to be honest because like there's a lot of crony capitalism in China and in Russia. Let's be honest, both countries operate on a paradigm of full-blown socialism, even if they try to reward and give people kickbacks and stuff.
Hmm.
There does come a point where like let me just say this is the point. You just say no. Just say no to socialism. Just actually call it out. And oh man, like we actually have to resist the blackmail. Is the way I would put it. We have to resist the blackmail because they try to taint you with it. They try to get you on the take. They try to get it normal. And I would rather like live in a hut made out of mud than
And that's a noble thing to do. And you see it a lot in politics. Do I take money from the NEA? They're offering money. I can use that money to get elected. I say no. I don't. I'm not going to take your money, and I don't get elected. What do you do? Do you take the money and get elected where you can make a difference, or do you turn down the money and don't get elected, you didn't make any difference.
Here's where I would grant people some grace there, is if they don't know, because there are issues where it's like, here's some organization, oh, we just help conservative people, and then somebody does some deeper investigation later on and finds out, oh yeah, they're like totally socialistic. And it's like, you should do your due diligence first, for sure.
Yeah, but in politics, if you don't take it, then they give it to your opponent.
Yeah, and well, I would appeal
That's
to God.
hard.
I would appeal to God and just be like,
It's hard.
you know what? It's been prophesied that the small and the weak things of the earth will break down the mighty and strong ones. And so there have to be, you'd have to take account of who are these people, what do they want, what would be the effect on me.
And I have
if I
lots
take
of
this.
friends that say absolutely not. I would never take UEA money, NEA money, public unions money to get elected.
Good.
Great.
Yeah,
Great.
and that's
But they don't
and-
get elected.
and they don't get elected. Yeah, but they're also not bought and paid for. You know, that's a virtuous outcome.
We
Let me
elect
put it that way.
progressive, and we get progressive government.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is you see, this is one of the reasons why they offer subsidies, right? Is because, and so this is one of the reasons why the answer has to be a categorical no. If you know that it's a subsidy, if you know that, if you've done your due diligence and you say, oh, I know this is where this is coming from,
Right.
or if you say, maybe I don't have the moral authority to say that because I didn't do the federal application for student aid, right? I actually took some money that was provided by a taxpayer
It was offered to you.
fund, right?
Sure.
And that makes me feel gross, frankly. And this is, I think, part of the way that they do it is, I would advocate for repentance, right? Is if we realize you've been tainted, you realize you've been living a subsidized life. Our lives can be subsidized in other ways besides financially.
Well, and you hope you can pay that back. You know, that your education, somehow you can pay that back, pay society back for that.
Yeah, and at any rate, and I pay taxes and stuff, right?
Sure.
But in any case, you got to figure out a way to reverse it. Instead of being more on the take, whoever's on the take right now, figure out how to be less on the take.
Well,
Figure out
yeah,
how to do without, you know?
Right. Try to stop those programs.
Yeah. Well,
Whether it makes us a hypocrite or not, we try to stop them
yeah.
for the future. You know,
Yeah.
yes, we took the subsidy, but I don't want you to take it because it's wrong. So,
Yeah, well, we got to lead the way, and yeah, I've not known how to respond to some of these things because being in the field that I am, I do have to buy things that are ultimately, assembled or manufactured in a foreign country and so on, and I would much rather promote domestic industry and not abet a globalist regime.
so if Elon Musk
But-
if he can tag these subsidies as waste, and President Trump accepts that and cuts them off, that's a good thing. Even though he benefited from those 10 years ago, if he
Not
can
necessarily.
stop that, I support that.
Well, I have a little bit more to say on that, but because that's the deregulation and reducing the size of the government.
Right.
I'll go ahead and just address that briefly, and I'll say, so let me start with reducing the size of the government, because that's one of Doge's claims to fame, right? We have fewer government employees, we have fewer people on the payroll, fewer wasteful programs, ostensibly, fewer line items, and so on.
Fraud.
Fewer items of identifiable fraud, right? Ostensibly. Here's my issue with that. Is, number one, not everybody who's being downsized is actually deadweight. My father used to work in the Department of Defense. One of my good friends was working in, he was he called himself a babysitter of the nuclear missile stockpile. He was working in a missile silo, and he was indispensable there. And Doge and Trump have just gone ahead and let go of a lot of these same positions. And both of these individuals, and I know quite a few others, who are real, true patriots. And if they got a directive from their superiors that was inappropriate, that was wrong, they would oppose it. Getting rid of those people is an extremely poor choice, because now there are fewer people who can resist, fewer people who can say no, fewer people who act on principle, and what they retain is the yes men. That's dangerous. They're getting rid of internal checks and balances. That's part of the effect of downsizing the government, right? And I understand there's a lot of dead weight, but this is one of those set spike moments between the Democrats and the now centrist Republican movement.
Yeah.
And I would submit to you that this is one of the many, many evidences that we are now in the end. We're now in the terminal stage, because they just sacrificed the donkey. The Democrat Party is not recovering from this. The scandal is too great. This was intentional. It was intentional. There was all this buildup of corruption so that Elon and his groupies could go through and find all the corruption, right? And expose it and downsize the government, right? The thing is, governments lose mass anytime you remove checks and balances. That objectively shrinks the government according to some metric, while simultaneously expanding its power, right? And so what they're really doing is they're consolidating power. And you can see this with Trump and USAID, or Trump and any of these organizations. He says, but he's taken to social media to say, yeah, I don't disagree with the premise of USAID. I'm like, I do. I disagree with the premise of an organization that is laundering money to foreign countries and so on, and using redistributive means to try to go and do goodery projects abroad when that should be a private undertaking.
Yeah, a few things they did were arguably good, but by and large, it was not.
Treaty obligations.
So they got rid of all that, and they said, okay, gave it to the Department of State. And the Department of State said, no, we want to keep a few things. Okay, keep them.
Right.
But you decide.
Yeah. So, but Trump and Elon in principle aren't even opposed to the existence of the organization, just the way it was used, right? And so, like, those kinds of things, and even the charter of the organization, he's like, I approve of that. And I'm like, I don't approve of it because it's a socialistic mission, right?
Yeah.
Inherently. And so...
Yeah, he should understand. And he doesn't.
And so what Trump objects to is not the socialism. What he objects to is who's in control of it.
Yeah, and it goes back to where he just doesn't know the proper role of government.
This is exactly what you would see, though, in a partisan tyrannical regime, right? You have tyrant A, tyrant B. We saw this already during World War II between the communists in the Soviet Union and the National Socialists, the Nazis, in Germany.
Well, I think there's a difference, though, between someone who doesn't understand and someone who does. I think the Biden administration certainly did understand, but they wanted so badly to build government. And they knew exactly what they were doing. Now, President Trump, he does not understand the proper role of government, but he's kind of stumbling onto it anyway. So by reducing the size, and yeah, there's going to be some mistakes. We hope those are corrected. We hope that our nuclear arsenal is well managed.
Yeah, and he's threatened to cut it in half.
Yeah, if he does that and it's a mistake, I hope they fix it.
So some mistakes are irreversible, and that's what we're seeing, partly through the tariff blunders. So help me to address this here, because what you just said, I think, contradicts the primary narrative about Trump versus Biden, right? The Trump in contrast to Biden. Trump's own narrative, self-narrative, and so on, is that Biden was just this airhead, this bungler, and then Trump is the strong, intelligent leader that America needs, and he knows what he's doing. And besides which, you yourself have argued for this, right? You've said that he knows what he's doing in the sense that he's being a bully and he's doing it with an objective, and at the same time just going crazy, pulling all these knobs and levers, unleashing mayhem. And I'll admit, I don't think I understand quite how to reconcile those two positions. Is he an airhead who just doesn't? Is because we just reverse the roles between Trump and Biden. The conservative, the MAGA narrative about Trump is he knows what he's doing. Biden didn't. You just said Biden knew what he was doing. Trump didn't, right? So I don't know, which is it?
Well, I don't really think either one knows what they're doing. President Biden was just too old. But so people around the president actually run the presidency. So a lot of that depends on who you pick. Now under Biden, the progressives I think just had their way.
So who's controlling Trump?
Under Trump, um, I don't know. I think he's more hands-on. He doesn't have the same mental problems that President Biden had, and he is surrounding himself with better people. I think the end result is going to be better. Maybe it'll be the same, but I think anytime you're trying to reduce the size of government, you're trying to pay off the national debt. Those are good things. We didn't see any of that from the Biden administration.
Yeah, and I'll submit that we haven't seen it from the Trump administration either, because again, I'm going from what are their fruits, not what have they promised to do, right? And so
you don't think he's cut spending?
Well, has he effectively? Because what's the effect on Americans? Like spending from our perspective, I understand that the Federal Reserve has and inflationary currency generally has created a situation in all these socialist programs. I've created the situation where it's in some ways kind of difficult for us to tell when our government has actually cut spending, because as long as they still have these computers that they can just type in numbers into and make money poof somewhere, then like we don't actually know what government spending is. And as long as Trump and others continue to create and prop up these programs like the Sovereign Wealth Fund that can go and just invest, reallocate, or even spend money without a congressional appropriation, without the corresponding accounting, that is accomplishing the opposite of what they are stating.
But he hasn't created that program. That's a trial balloon.
He's mandated the creation of it, and with those express purposes behind it. So he has in fact expressed intent to use these fiscal weapons that we really can't monitor, that we can't falsify, that they're actually spending more money than before. That's something we objectively cannot falsify.
Well,
and so any claims that they are reducing spending, it reduces to Elon's tweets basically saying, oh, Doge saved us this much money today because we found this government program that we're spending however much money for lobsters on treadmills or something like that, right? Crayfish, whatever it was. Oh, it was shrimp on treadmills. And it's like he picks those because they go viral, right? But in terms of the actual, I've been looking at the Doge tracker, for example. I put out a video on this a while ago saying, hey, actually just unplug that money printing machine. And neither Trump nor Musk to this day have actually unplugged the money printing machine.
Yeah, we want them to do it.
And so the notion, like they can keep up the theatrics, and they could even be losing real money, right? Like people have said, oh, Elon's such a hero for doing this because he's hemorrhaging money from his Tesla stocks falling and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, he's not a hero for doing this because, and neither is Trump, because both of them were heavily subsidized by the government to do this, and they got tons and tons of money. They're not hurting, right? And so it's money the government, in Elon's case anyway, it's money that the government directly gave him, or that's the gains from that. So it's like, what's this sacrifice narrative? I don't understand that. And because
at least they're not getting wealthier.
But even there, and
this is what I'm saying, people go into Congress and become millionaires.
But here's the thing: is if we say that Elon is using his money, like he's sacrificing money to save America, I would say that it is actually more plausible, in fact, that he is sacrificing money to gain power. Because we see that as
President Trump, and President Trump is not taking a salary, but he wants his face on Mount Rushmore.
Well, sure, of course he does want that, but I'm imputing a desire or motive there, right? I don't know if he actually cares about that. I assume that he does, but I don't want to make this about my reading.
He wants a legacy. He's narcissistic.
Well, and that's something that left-leaning media has definitely propped up that image of him, and I find it a credible one. But at the
I
same time, I'm like,
hope we've
why
got
is he doing what he's doing? If narcissism, I don't want to dwell on narcissism, basically, as long as he is actually dismantling checks and balances, as long as he's threatening to impeach these activist judges and bring the entire government under the control of a single party. That's the definition of tyranny per the Federalist Papers, Federalist number 47. So I'm like, whatever he accomplishes, whatever he supposedly wants to do, I'm trying to pay attention to what he is actually doing and what he has stated that he wants to do, because we should take those as credible threats, right? And many people look at that and they do take that as a credible threat, regardless of what he ends up doing.
Yeah, there are many things that he can't do. So
It's a decreasing list. The size of that list is decreasing. The list of things that he can't do in terms of government power. Yes, that's what I would submit there, and that's dangerous, and that's why I say the argument that he's making the government smaller. No. No. He's got a big long list of executive actions, executive orders, and tons of agencies and departments that he's creating, kind of invisibly. He doesn't tout those as much. Sometimes he'll tout one. But I mean, you look at his executive order page, and it's 21 pages of executive orders. And
I know it's been crazy.
Deployed another huge boatload of them today. So yeah, that's part of just the. There's one more. We could talk for days on end with Elon Musk's things here. I'll give another example real quickly. He's been talking about insider trading with Congress, right? Saying, how does somebody get a net worth of $200 million with a salary of $200,000, right? That's a fair question, right?
It is.
And but here's one of the challenges with that. I'm going to call Elon Musk out as a flaming hypocrite right there, because Elon Musk has actually managed to make more money than all of Congress combined through his own personal money laundering, which is just subsidies. And subsidies, we've grown accustomed to thinking of subsidies not as money laundering just because they're normal and they're legal in theory. But the fact of them being legal doesn't make it not money laundering. And money laundering, by nature, by definition, is there's money that came from a dirty source, and the person who's wanting to spend that money wants you to believe that the money's clean. And I hear the people saying this about Elon pretty often, saying, "Oh, he's just a really good businessman. He's a really good CEO. He's a great tech guy. He's a great, he managed his business as well." I'm like, no, that's not the reason why his net worth is $370 billion. The reason why his net worth is $370 billion is because he got all the subsidies, right? And so if we claim that Elon Musk, is a private businessman or something like that, then we're conflating public money with private. It's a public-private partnership in reality.
Well, he treated subsidies as loans. He paid them back.
Some of them, yes. Some of them, no. There was a mix, like I said. Some were just direct cash injections. Some were loans.
Congress, they're not looking at people who made that money legally. They're trying to find something illegal.
But that's the only point of difference. Elon Musk.
That's a big point.
Was that?
That's a big point.
Yeah, and so this is why I'm raising the alarm right now.
Someone's taking money under the table in Congress. We want to know about it, and we want that person in jail.
Yeah, obviously, but also Elon has. People say he's not a politician, but he has enormous political clout. He has a ton of power, and practically speaking, so he has the world's largest free speech platform, which he purchased using the gains from those government subsidies. Right? He would not have been able to purchase Twitter without that.
Yeah.
Therefore, logically, we infer that X/Twitter is in fact a government propaganda platform. It is not a free speech platform.
Well, it's owned. They're more loans than subsidies. But
who's paying them back?
What
are the strings attached? I don't want to euphemize it that way, because even a temporary loan. Because if I get a business loan for $500 million or something like that, and I have to repay it in 5 years, 10 years, and I repay it in 3 or something like that, that's still I would still very much be beholden to whoever bailed me out on that, right? Because the rule of it's usury, frankly. That a lot of this, the sovereign wealth fund, the subsidies, it's usury. That's how they get money. If you have money, it's very, very easy, relatively speaking, to get money. If you don't have money, you can't get more money,
Yeah, you took
except
a loan
by
on your house, so
working at McDonald's or something. So,
you're gonna pay back the loan on your house plus interest.
yes, plus interest. So the question is, what
A
do
lot.
the Gadiantons want out of Elon Musk, given that they've bailed him out so much to the tune of billions of dollars, way more than Congress, all of the members of Congress combined? Why are they doing that? What do they want?
I think it backfired on him because he's in there slashing all of their waste and corruption.
See, I can't believe that. I can't believe that it backfired on the people who are the ultimate orchestrators behind
I
this.
think they're just pretending to cut waste and fraud.
So there can be some real carnage. I'll grant them that. There can be some real carnage. I'll bring a couple of different examples into the room. One is the game of chess, right? You know that when you play chess, right, you can place a piece in a very tantalizing position that's like, oh wow, you just left that piece unguarded, right? I'm gonna go, and that's exactly what the Gadianton robbers just did with the Democrat Party. They placed it right there, right out in broad daylight, and they said, this is a foreshadowing, by the way, of Alma chapter 30, the last few verses of how the devil treats his children. You see just how unsupported the corrupt, the adulterous, the scandalous Democrat, the Washington Democrats are being viewed right now, the way they're being treated and seen. This is a foreshadow of every time somebody works for the devil, this is how you're going to end up, right? But they're sacrificing that piece to put us in checkmate.
So if Doge is the chess piece, then what's your prediction?
I can tell you exactly what's going to happen. We're going to Trump is going to impeach those activist judges, just like Nayib Bukele did.
He'd have to have the Senate do it, right?
Yeah, he's going to have the House call
so
for
the
impeachment,
Senate impeaches some judges,
and the Senate will try those impeachments. Yep, and then Trump will get to make his own partisan picks for those replacement judges, and then all three branches of government will be under the control of a single party. And that's exactly what Nayib Bukele did in El Salvador, and they will try to keep up the narrative for a little while that everything is hunky-dory, this is such a peaceful, glorious government. First Thessalonians 5, verse 13, or 5, verse 3, I think it is. For when they shall say peace and safety, then cometh sudden destruction. And we can cross-reference that with the reminders of the prophets. This is one of the reasons why I knew Trump would not be a political savior, is Ezra Taft Benson warned us many years ago. The year I was born, he warned us, saying that the Constitution will not be saved in Washington.
So will he cancel the midterm elections?
That might be irrelevant, depending on. Again, it's like that chess thing, right? They can afford to make concessions in certain areas as long as they know that they've traded up. They've gotten a piece of higher value. They've gotten a position of greater importance to them.
I just wondered because he could lose Congress in the midterms. And then it won't be one party anymore.
Well,
which is how I like it. I like having Congress one party and the president another because nothing gets done.
That's the way the Constitution is designed. It's not designed for the. So originally, House of Representatives is supposed to be all Democrats. Senate is supposed to be all ultra Republicans. That's what I call them.
Yep.
And executive branch officers are supposed to be only Republicans, with a lowercase r, right? And no parties, because the parties lie to you. So even if some Democrats got involved, let's say the Republicans don't win the midterms enough to impeach those judges or whatever, or I don't know the timing of when they're going to act on those impeachments, but they've stated that they're going to do that, and I take those threats seriously because that's a tyrannical move, and it's probably just a matter of as soon as they can actually pull it off, is when they're going to do it.
And they're so slow at that.
But even if you have, here's my expectation. Even if you have some Democrats in there, they can backstab you last minute. they can backstab their own constituents last minute because they know they're in the throwaway maneuver now, right? And the identity of the Democrat Party has been shaken so terribly already. You can't trust a person with a Democrat label to vote according to what you want the Democrats to do, because they're not beholden to their constituents. That's the point. That's the very reason they're erasing checks and balances, is so they can become less and less beholden to their constituents.
Right.
And so whether that's the case or not, whether it takes that long or not, I'm not going to give an opinion on right now. But that's what they're going to do, is what they've stated that they're going to do. And if I can maybe temper that with this one other acknowledgement. If the Gadiantons find a different way to achieve the same effect that's easier for them, they'll probably just do it, right? They're opportunistic. The way I hear the prophets speak about the future, the devil is increasing his flexibility, his opportunities. And there are many more assaults that may come. That is to say, he's got a lot of latitude, he's got a lot of discretion, he's got a lot of pieces on the board. We don't have very many pieces on the board anymore, because we're really close to the end game already. The Constitution's already hanging by a thread.
That's true.
And this is one of the reasons why I say even a little mole, like, maybe I shouldn't try to anthropomorphize these characters, but even a little Trump chewing on even just chewing a little bit more of socialism, like, that could actually push us over the edge. And he's shown very much a willingness to push us over the edge of some very dangerous precipices. And this is not something to disregard. You know, the instability of investment, the favoritism that he's still showing towards the CCP and towards Russia. That is extremely alarming. I mentioned the mineral deals earlier. Sorry, just going to touch on a little point there with Trump. But, like, he's threatened to carve up Ukraine for its natural resources and demand reparations, basically. He used the euphemism, the term equalization. But war is not profitable. We shouldn't be demanding money from other people, especially when we have a defense obligation for them. But also, and then there's
we wanted to do that in Iraq also. We wanted to take some money to pay for what we spent in Iraq. We didn't do it, but a lot of people supported that.
But then that gets our claws deeper into those foreign countries, and then we become more involved in the secret combination. Anyways, let me see. I think there were a couple other things I wanted to say about Elon, and then any other thoughts you have right now? Sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot.
No, I'm going to make some predictions, though. You made your. I will predict that we will cut government spending. We'll have a booming economy in a year's time, and maybe even start paying off some of the national debt, but not increasing the debt. So maybe we'll go from 34 trillion to 33 trillion. And that we'll win the midterm elections, and then probably do nothing for 2 years.
Do nothing sounds great. I'm going to predict that's not going to happen. And actually, I'm actually going to issue a warning here based on what I've seen, because it's entirely possible a year or two from now that you'll think you're vindicated in that, even when the reality has actually gone more towards the opposite direction. There are a lot of people, especially Latter-day Saints, especially people who are well-connected, influencers, or wealthy, who are going to be very, very prone to thinking that way. And here's why. This is exactly what I've seen on Elon Musk's platform. So the people who are Elon's yes men, they're promoted on the platform. People who parrot Elon's same messaging. Like you sign up, you go to Elon's platform X and you sign up for a new account. First thing you see, you get dropped into this chasm of just bottomless, all these accounts that are recommended for you to follow. Elon Musk is at the very top. Yeah, of course, you should follow this guy, this marvelous entrepreneur, this innovator with this private social media, free speech platform, of course, right? So tons of people follow him. And the people who follow him are massively incentivized, they're financially incentivized to parrot his same kind of messaging so that they can grow in popularity, so they can go and like slurp up some of his fame, right? And the algorithm rewards that. They can get monetized. You'll get monetized quicker if you agree with Elon. That's a route to popularity there. And so the most popular accounts on there, the biggest influencer accounts, there are some, opposition accounts too, but like that's how that works, right? And so what happens, what ends up happening there, Elon Musk said, we are the news now, social media, right? And what he means, of course, is his band of influencers there who follow who sing the same tune as he does. And what I've seen them do is they incessantly write off Trump's failures. They incessantly try to just tell themselves that Elon's trying to do something good and so on. And all the naysayers are just delusional. You can point to data, they don't care. And I've been actively banned from a lot of the different functions there. The connection functions on Elon's platform, Spaces, being able to even just communicate. I've been shadow banned. I'm shadow banned on there right now. I have no idea what I said or did that got me into the box again. But anyways, so he can mute you pretty easily. And so part of the effect of that is the messaging that people will actually see and hear will always paint a rosy picture of the Trump presidency, regardless of how bad things actually are. And so what you and I need to do is we need to have lots of friends and talk with them regularly who work in a lot of different fields and see a lot of different perspectives than we do. Because when it comes to people who have been bitten by the GPU tariffs, that's me. Like, I can tell you, I could give you line items, how many thousands of dollars of my family's own hard-earned funds were just flushed down the toilet because of Trump's GPU tariffs. I can give you that perspective. If you don't know anybody who has experienced that, it's really easy, like me looking at farmers, because I don't have experience being a farmer, being like, some big dollar amount, subsidy check. What is that? What's the actual effect of that? Together with the tariffs and whatever else. Like, I don't know, right? But this is one of the ways that the adversary destroys us, is he's whittling off the most vulnerable a little bit at a time. So we should be talking with people who are like the poor people who are tempted to go invest in cryptocurrencies and stuff like that. And we should be warning them not to do it because it's a rich man's game. It's a pyramid scheme. It's the same phenomenon, by the way, as Social Security and Medicare taxes. They're actually twice what most employees think they are, because the employer pays the same percentage amount before you even get your gross pay.
Right.
So the employees never see that. Only the self-employed and employers in the United States, which are just a fraction of the population, are even aware that our government is actually taxing us that much.
Oh yeah, I was self-employed. I saw it.
So we need to have these connections. We need to be aware and not just follow the Elon influencer groupies, because they'll tell us everything is rosy when everything's on fire. They've already done it. They've already been doing it. That's their MO. And so they're going to continue to tell us all is well in Zion, yea, Zion prospereth. While there are literally people around us who are crashing and burning, committing suicide because they don't know how they're going to make ends meet. So we gotta. It's like when I was a missionary. One of the things that I felt impressed was most needed, most urgent. It's a difficult task, but we need people everywhere who are willing to do this. Is keep an eye out when you're there in sacrament meeting. Yeah, take account of who's there. Notice who's there, but notice who's not there. Because otherwise, you're never going to have the capacity. We're never going to notice. We're never going to realize when there's a straying sheep. You're there with the 90 and 9. Things are great. Where's the one? I don't know. I didn't even notice he was gone. Oops. Okay, now next time it's the 98, 97, 96. Pretty soon you got a flock of 34. And
Yeah.
everyone there thinks it's great because, wow, look at us, go us, we love each other. And you don't even realize who's disappeared, who's evaporated, because it's this steady attrition the devil inflicts on us. So it's like that poem. It says, first they came for the, I'll put it this way, first they came for the illegal immigrants, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't an illegal immigrant. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. They came for the Mormons, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Mormon, right? And they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. That's exactly the strategy here. So temper those expectations with that, please. That's what I would say to that. We're probably winding down here. I've got just a couple more screenshots that I wanted to share here on Elon being a socialist. Then we can wrap up with any closing remarks, any further discussion. Let me share this screen here. This has been a fun conversation, Drew, by the way. I really appreciate you making time for this.
Yeah, thank you. It's good.
It's better than fun. We're doing the Lord's work when we're sharing what people need to know. Okay, so is Elon Musk a socialist? In his own words, yes. I'm going to go ahead and read his tweet here. This is from June 16th, 2018. I don't know if this is big enough font here, so I'm going to go ahead and blow that up a little bit.
Is that
And
relevant?
Elon Musk, was that?
Is that relevant now?
Yeah, I would say that it is.
Okay.
So he says the following. He says, by the way, I am actually a socialist, just not the kind that shifts resources from most productive to least productive, pretending to do good while actually causing harm. True socialism seeks the greatest good for all. So I have to take him at face value here. I'm not going to assume that he's just trolling people just to get a reaction or something silly like that. That he means what he says. Because otherwise we're working with a known hypocrite and a disingenuous person, right? So this is how he genuinely feels or felt back then. Did he change? I see no evidence that he's changed. I see no evidence because he's still his mode of operation to this day is to shift resources from, in his view, the less productive, I guess, towards the more productive, if you will, or seek the greatest good for all, right? That's his cover story, right? And this is, anyways, just the day before, this is a little bit humorous. Those who proclaim themselves socialists are usually depressing, have no sense of humor, and have attended expensive college. Loves irony. Anyways, he's quite a character, for sure. But also for many years, this is my final major point on him for now, is just to say, he's for many years been a poster child for universal income. And he claims that it won't be universal basic income. He claims that it will be universal high income. And yeah, he says, yeah, that's sad. But he also says it's because AI will take over your job and people will become useless and irrelevant, and that's depressing. And you can basically work if you want to, but you don't have to, kind of thing. I haven't seen any of that, by the way. We all have to work, except for his groupies who are heavily subsidized. They maybe don't think they have to work because of their subsidies. But anyways, Andrew Yang used to be one of the big, he used to be the poster child for universal basic income and stuff, which is just unvarnished redistribution. And here's this guy claiming it's inevitable. And I think this is, coming back to that conversation earlier, what would you do if you were offered a subsidy? This is the lie. The lie that Elon Musk is telling right here is that socialism's inevitable, you should just embrace it. We're going to be a socialist state pretty soon. That's exactly what he's saying. And you should lean into it. And just slurp up those subsidies and do whatever you want with your life so that you don't feel worthless and nihilistic. But the problem is you're going to feel worthless and nihilistic because of those subsidies, because of the socialism. And so claiming that it's inevitable, I'm just going to say you'd have to be really misguided to believe that that's true. But it is just an outright lie, because no, it's never going to be inevitable. We don't have to abandon our livelihood and our free will and just give it over to the government, because that's what this presupposes. It presupposes that people will just lose the will to work for themselves or the means to work for themselves because the government's usurped it all. He's just outlined his plan. And so this is his worldview. So even if we want to say that they just don't know what they're talking about, and it's like, yeah, and I don't want them in government because I don't want people who are total ignorant nihilists and socialists running our government. So, anyways, sorry to be so unflattering tonight. I'm sure there are plenty of people who will say I'm doom pilling and everything like that, but I'm just like, out of the guy's own mouth. So, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on Elon Musk calling himself a socialist and saying
Well,
we'll have?
I'm hoping that that was just a tongue-in-cheek conversation at some point. You know, what was that, 8 years ago? But and I hope he's changed. If he truly thinks he was a socialist, then I hope he's changed now.
In which case, I would flip that around and say, what evidences do you see that that's the case?
Well, the same evidence he wasn't he a Democrat or something before?
Yeah, but what does that mean?
Nothing. No.
I mean, our own state senator right now was just
Yes,
last year is a former Democrat, and
Great
he hasn't changed as to his policies or his views on things. He's changed the way he talks about some things, but he's still trying to push us leftward.
Yep, Senator Curtis.
Yep.
Um,
So I don't know. I don't want to like misrepresent your position or anything like that. But for anybody listening, I'm just like, this is where I'm at. Is the only evidence that Trump and Elon are not socialists just that we think that they don't know what they're doing, or we hope that they've changed from their prior ways, or
well, they're actually doing things. They're,
I know they're doing things.
having those, and it's not just Elon, but it's his group, and they're, going through the algorithms and finding waste and fraud. That's good stuff. I hope that continues. And I hope it actually is implemented. I hope they find some people in Congress. I don't care if they're Democrats or Republicans. If they've been taking money, they should go to prison. I want people to actually go to prison. Bad people. So
And only bad people.
yeah, and I know
Due
and I
process.
know that won't happen unless someone actually does something. So I think we're seeing them try to do that now. And that's good. I like it.
I guess my take on it is, where's the check? Because I have no personal way to actually verify that our government was spending X number of millions of dollars to do
No, we don't.
shrimp on treadmill studies, because it's just their say so, right? And that's one of the hazards here, is it's just their say so. And even if it's true, which I don't doubt that a ton of the crazy stuff that Doge claims to have found has actually been happening, is actually true. And that's part of the set spike system. It's like when Napoleon Bonaparte rose to power on the ashes of the French Directory in 1799. He was going after corruption. And the corruption was real. Corruption was real during the French Revolution. And yet, where did it lead? It led to this overreaction, this consolidation of power, and an authoritarian government. It's every single time this has been tried. That every single time we've had somebody going through cleaning up the corruption. Oh, look at all the corruption I found. You should trust me even more. And all we can do is hope they're not going to abuse that power, because there's no real check on them anymore. Not that we know of, anyway. I think that's game over. That's checkmate. And that's unrecoverable, because we can't, other than let the Soviets come in and bomb them all to pieces, because they're going to get backstabbed by their puppet masters too. And who knows what miracles the Lord will provide from there. But it's got to be up to us to actually do something about it. If the Constitution is going to be saved at all, if people's lives are going to be saved, we're getting a very authoritarian government. And they're putting on a show. And I practically speaking don't care what's on the show, because, again, Federal Reserve, printing money. They're not putting a stop to that. They use rhetoric, they use smoke and mirrors, they use distractions, just like all the regimes before them. What are they actually doing? They're consolidating power. Because if we want to see those arrests, though, we need to restore juries, including the grand jury. Because it's not going to happen otherwise. Trump has promised, by the way, to use grand juries against these allegedly corrupt people. Problem is, grand juries can be tampered with if they're not grassroots, if they're controlled or gatekept by judges and prosecutors and stuff like we've accustomed to doing. And we're still getting shut out. We still don't have oversight of these processes. You and I will never be, they'll never actually tell us. So, anyways,
Yeah.
I think I rest my case. The corruption of Trump and Elon is actually a continuation of the prior corruption. There is collusion between the parties. They're joined at the hip. It's like in the Ezra's eagle prophecy in 2nd Ezra's 11, in the Apocrypha. There's this three-headed eagle, and it's in power over this parable for the Roman Empire basically living on as an authoritarian government over the United States, and has these three heads. And the head on the right swallows up the head on the left. I suspect that may have been intended as an allegory for us to understand what's happening right now. That you can have this infighting, and there could be real bloodshed, real carnage that comes as a result of it between this party system, but they're part of the same animal. They're part of the same beast. And you read what the Lord has to say about that beast, and it's not flattering. Anyways,
Yeah.
do you have any other points you want to raise or things to
No,
discuss?
no, good discussion.
Well, did I convince you? Like binary, thumbs up, thumbs down, yay or nay?
No,
You don't think they're socialists?
no, I don't.
Okay, well, I believe I've sounded the warning voice. I'm going to go ahead and call it a. I've shared the tip of the iceberg here,
Okay.
and I guess one of my biggest concerns, like I voiced earlier, is that many of us will still not see the evidences, the realization, not have the realization that what I've told you here is true until it's too late. Because of that carefully controlled narrative. Because of that, I'm just going to go ahead and, sorry, tact is not my strongest point, but I'm going to call it wishful thinking. And I know because I was infected with it. We need to rise above the level of wishful thinking, because that's what I'm continuing to hear is the primary case for Donald Trump and Elon Musk not being socialists. Is we just, I don't know, we know they were, we know they've done socialist things, we know they've moved in that direction, they've tipped scales in that way, and we just, I don't know, just kind of hope that they don't do more of that stuff, and yet they're amassing to themselves more power to do so.
Yeah,
And
and I believe government is, well, my 30 years of experience that government is a game of inches, and that's just what I'm thinking is these are inches. I think we're moving in the right direction.
yeah, I wish that were true. I just,
Yeah, and you obviously don't believe
they
that.
they say they are, but again, look at what they're doing instead of just what they're saying that they're doing. Because yeah,
That's what I'm looking at. They're making change.
but again, like, I mean, do you really know that they're? Do you really know that
No,
the
I'm
deficit's
not.
going
I'm
down?
not
Or
there seeing it. I mean, I can't do that.
it's self-reported. We don't have an independent party to check on them anymore.
Anytime you get, CNN hates President Trump, that's a good thing.
I'm on board against that too, because
Progress.
that's reverse psychology, right? Is I re I retweeted slash re-shared some posts years ago that were basically to that effect. Say, well, everything CNN says is false, or everything, if MSNBC hates me, that's a good thing, right? That kind of thing. ABC, CNN. Since then, what I've realized is that's a really inaccurate, it's a misleading substitute for actual knowledge, right? Because we're trying to use something as evidence for the truth of some proposition, right?
But
And
we'll never have actual knowledge.
oh, I don't subscribe to that at all.
We can't be there.
So I'm gonna say I'm just gonna pull Moroni chapter 10 verse 5. We absolutely can know. By the power of the Holy Ghost, you may know the truth of all things. God can reveal to you what is happening in our government, and might not tell you everything all at once. He probably won't tell you it all at once. It'll be line upon line, most likely, and we do have to do our homework too. We got to exercise the faith and curiosity. But yeah, again, by their fruits you shall know them. But here's what's so dangerous though about a mindset that if CNN hates somebody, then that guy must be a really good guy, right? You just told your adversary how to deceive you. You just handed him the key to your own mind, the key to your beliefs, and you said, go ahead and take it, right? Because now the adversary can say, oh, well, let's just employ some reverse psychology because that works so well right here. That's your epistemology. I'm just going to exploit that. And that's exactly what we've seen. That's what the two-party system does. That's what it's been designed to do from the beginning by the adversary, is to exploit our minds. And what I fear that if left unchecked, is one of the reasons why the prophets have urged us to be peacemakers, I believe, so insistently, is because if we hate our enemies more than we love the truth, we will be deceived. It's a guarantee. And, insisting that, oh, your dislike, CNN, is a compliment to me, or a compliment to whomever you dislike.
I just don't know how to use that. You're saying that we shouldn't use that as a barometer.
No.
Then should we think that Satan is trying to trick us? So instead of being happy that CNN doesn't like President Trump, that we should go and elect progressives to office?
Well, that's a false dichotomy, right? So don't rejoice in iniquity, first of all, but if we shouldn't use it as a barometer at all, because what other people think shouldn't really weigh anything. The facts, the truth, that's what should weigh anything.
But we don't know the truth.
We can.
So we should just pray about every decision and not use our eyes and ears.
Use your eyes and ears and pray about every decision.
Okay.
That is 100%. That's I've been adamant about this for many, many years, and I've tried to teach people. I've been really trying to help everyone understand faith and reason are perfectly compatible. In fact, I can prove using the scientific method that the scientific method requires the exercise of faith, and it is rooted in revelation. You cannot employ the scientific method and learn anything with certainty unless your premises were fed to you by, ultimately, revelation. If you can't ground it in conscience and the Holy Ghost, then you have no way of knowing that it's true.
Okay.
But those are the seed. That's the foundation, right? And so if you build on that, then you can use your observation and unpack more premises and use logic and deduction to learn more things that you also know unequivocally are true. But
so make your decisions, pray about them, feel good about it, go forward.
Yeah, and never use what anyone says on social or other media as a weather vane. We're right now in the middle of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and Jesus taught us the meaning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread is to detox from the doctrines of the world. He said, beware the leaven of the Pharisees. And he said he explained leaven is the doctrine. Beware the doctrine of the Pharisees. What is the doctrine of the Pharisees? It's hypocrisy. President Nelson, when he invited the youth to engage in a 7-day social media fast, that is exactly the ideology that he used. He said, take a break from fake. And he's warned us many times, all of us, not just the youth. He said, if most of the information you get comes from social or other media, your ability to hear the whisperings of the Spirit will be diminished. And he told us this right at the time, by the way, that a lot of the Trumpian, Elonite propaganda was spreading throughout social media. And, of course, their allies in the mainstream media were playing along with that with their reverse psychology. Controlled opposition, because it's a thing, because controlled opposition is a thing, it logically follows that we cannot make our decisions on the basis of who opposes who.
Okay. Fair
We,
enough.
we, we can't reliably infer that the enemy of our enemy is our friend. So if we understand that much, like, this is one of the reasons why if you put me in a cage with the 12th Amendment, I will strip it down to bare neutrons. I will turn it back into unorganized matter, so that we can actually have civilized dialogue and real insight on the issues that affect us, because the two-party system stinks. And George Washington was acting under the inspiration of the Holy Ghost when he forewarned us that you cannot shield yourselves too much against partisan misrepresentations.
Right.
They misrepresent each other, and they misrepresent themselves. And I can attest, with my own knowledge, born of blood, sweat, and tears, those two heads, they're part of the same beast. They're just sock puppets.
Hmm.
Anyway. Well, here's hoping that we gain the revelation we need, get the insight we need. Detox from social media and other media. That's my advice to everybody. Because the fighting, legacy media, social media, every single time. Pull back, ponder and study and ponder the words of the prophets even more than you study those. And then you'll start to see what's going on there. Is that, and my huge regret here, this has cost me enormously. Probably the single biggest error in my life was that I spent too long in partisan thinking. I spent too long trying to persuade people that Trump was okay, it's all right, he's not doing all those bad things that you're saying he's doing, before I realized that the leftist media were allied with him because they benefit him, and that they're there to cry wolf. They're there to scream that he's doing something when he's, got lots of plausible deniability and probably isn't actually doing it, so that when he goes and does it for real, all of his fans will be like, oh no, don't worry, that's been debunked, that's fake news, right? That is exactly the play. They want to proactively defuse the double jeopardy there, and just, anyway, so we've got to be really cautious of all these things.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining. It has been a pleasure. Thanks for making the time, Drew.
All right. Have a good night.
All right. You too. Thanks so much.